Good evening. Welcome to this workshop of the Hopkins School Board. We have two agenda items this evening, our virtual EDU update, and then further discussion on our fiscal year 2022-2023 budget with Director Chapanduka. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Mary Perry-Reed to introduce our first agenda item and invite the virtual EDU team up to the table.
Thank you, Chair Westmoreland, and good evening to board members, colleagues in the space, and folks in the audience who have joined us this evening. Thanks so much for being here. I'm really happy to welcome my colleagues to the board table, Director of Innovation, Design, and Learning, Ann Ertl, who will provide a little bit of a framing, and Dr. Tiffany Nielsen. I'm not very good with hyphenated names, even when I have one. We call her Dr. Tiff, so I don't even know if I've pronounced her whole name ever. But Dr. Tiff is our learning design futurist and the architect behind Virtual EDU. And then we have our Director of Communications and Marketing, Jolene Goldati, who will also help with the presentation. So one of our great something that is a great source of pride and joy for us in Hopkins is our K-12 virtual EDU, which is now in year 2. We have served over 300, maybe close to 400 families in 2 years, and we have been working hard to engage in market research to determine what does the future of virtual schooling look like and what are families looking for in a blended or flexible virtual experience. And we have lots of people really focused on ensuring that virtual EDU continues to be a viable and vibrant and high quality opportunity for families who feel like it'd be a perfect fit. So I'm really grateful for this team of thought partners in this space, and also for lots of other people who have helped with this. And I'll turn it over to Anne, who will provide a little bit of a framing, then we'll get into the presentation.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mary Perry-Reed. Good evening, board members. Well, I just wanted to start out the conversation by taking us a little bit back into history. It was about 18 months ago or so when we had been through a few months of distance learning. We knew that we wanted to build an online school, and we knew that we had a Hopkins learning framework and a really big, bold vision. That's about all we knew. And so we started looking for somebody who could turn that vision into a real, tangible learning space for our Hopkins and outside of Hopkins scholars, and we found Dr. Tiffany. And so she is going to share some really exciting updates with you tonight, but really wanted to highlight her work and Jolene's work in really turning what was like a beautiful dream into a really beautiful reality.
So Jolene and I will be speaking tonight, updating you on the current state and our next steps with virtual EDU. Before we begin, I do want to give a nod that this is not solo work. We have a phenomenal virtual EDU staff that goes above and beyond every day. We've been working really closely with the marketing and communications team and a strategic planning team, which most of our cabinet members are on as well, to make a 1, 3, and a 5-year strategic plan. So it really has been a collective effort. I'll speak on behalf of those groups tonight, but I wanted to make sure to give a nod to those communities as well. Anything on here? Nope. Well, let's get started. All right, so starting off tonight, we would like to invite you to jot your own little note about what you think makes virtual EDU first in the state of Minnesota. We're going to come back to it at the end, and you can check your answer. So in virtual EDU, I'll do some framing about who we are, and then we'll move into some of our goals that Anne had referred to. The first is Virtual EDU offers programming for K-12, so we serve the 13 grades. And we intentionally are designing our programming around a community that thrives in an online setting for a variety of reasons. Our community is intended to be restorative and human-focused, so we're online, but we're not alone. And we approach our learning through project-based a learning approach for social change specifically. So as Anne referred to, I joined the Hopkins team, and within my first day, or maybe two, was given this goal. Welcome aboard to Hopkins. And so one of the things with this goal is this is how we actually framed the start of our work with our virtual EDU staff on their very first day, a couple weeks after getting this goal. And our intent is to build a model that is productively disruptive towards more equitable practices and is innovative in online and blended learning models that's really unique across the state of Minnesota. Our other goal that is tied to that is to have a model that attracts enrollment. So on the next slide, I'm going to just do a high-level overview of some of the things that we frame as our core beliefs and approaches in virtual EDU. We lean into restorative culture and a social justice lens. We have start and end our day in community. So our students are engaged, they're with their peers, they're with their teachers. We have a variety of structures, whole group, small group, one-on-one, all of the things that make our learners thrive in in-person settings, those exist in online. Our data has shown that our students have a really deep sense of belonging in virtual EDU, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. One of the things that I think is really important to highlight is one of our success indicators for Vision 2031 is for Hopkins to be a beacon of innovation. And in virtual EDU, we are working to show progress towards that and evidence of that with the goal and this charge. MDE specifically has asked us to present on multiple occasions to the online learning provider leaders to help them on their pathways to have more inclusive and restorative online spaces. Neighboring districts and their online leaders are reaching out and sometimes sending their staff to our staff to learn how we're doing it. And market research is showing that virtual EDU's offerings are unique in the educational landscape, and that's an entry point into changing the future of education. So on the next slide, we will touch on our highlight reel of the new and exciting things that are going to happen next year. We're going to do some clickety clicks. I'll be here in a second.
See, no sound. Don't look.
Try to do this picture.
That's adorable.
In the meantime, we can do a drum roll.
We are so ready. We
So ready.
But wait, are you ready?
I might need some sound help because I've done.
Oh, do you need to plug in?
That's
It
up.
looks like you've done all the things
I've
there.
done all the things that I know how to do.
Steve, can you hear us? Our sound isn't work. Oh, maybe we just didn't plug something in. We're having trouble with sound, but we'll test it again.
Virtual
We're
EDU
good.
families, are you ready for some incredible news? We're taking things to the next level with a brand new option. And get this, it's the first of its kind in the state of Minnesota. Say hello to our revolutionary blended learning pathway, combining the convenience and flexibility of online learning with the personal touch of in-person instruction. Blended learning will provide you the best of both worlds in one dynamic online community. Blended learning and fully online, two fantastic options, one Hopkins virtual EDU.
That's exciting.
We received really positive feedback from our current families. So we did a review with our current families, and then we're in the process of messaging out throughout the district stakeholders. After spring break, we'll go broader with our messaging. One of the things with virtual EDU is with these two pathways, they all live under the umbrella of one Hopkins virtual EDU family. Students and families will have the choice if they want to continue in the fully online experience or if they want to opt into the blended experience. This is stemming from listening to our families, saying, and they've expressed that this is an option that they would like. They want some more of those in-person touch points, as well as research. Our market research revealed that 83% of families felt that those in-person experiences were really important for social development. So for those that are thriving in the fully online pathway, that will continue. For those that are wanting a little bit more, or that kind of middle space, the blended option is a great new addition for them. In the next couple of slides, we'll give kind of a high-level overview of some details. We know that our families need details to make decisions. We wanted you to have some background information so that you felt confident in answering questions when community members asked about the new pathway. So in the blended learning pathway, students will learn from two locations, one their home or setting of their choice, and the other is from our virtual EDU site that will be in Golden Valley. For in-district scholars and our equity options students from North Minneapolis, transportation will be provided on the days that they have in-person days, or a caregiver can drop off their student. As well, meals will be provided by our nutrition services department, and we've been working on a few pathways for both breakfast and lunch. Learning opportunities will be a blend of the dynamic learning environment that they are used to, as well as some of those in-person opportunities. And we will continue our monthly Flex and Connect special events. Next year, we'll be adding some family field trips as well. On the next slide, sometimes it's helpful to have a visual of like what that structure looks like. So for our elementary scholars, you can see by the yellow schoolhouse that they will come to our Meadowbrook East site on Mondays and Wednesdays, and then their online learning will happen Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. For our secondary scholars, just a flip of the days, they will come on site Tuesdays and Thursdays, and they will learn online Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays within that blended option. Our school hours will stay the same, 8 a.m. to 2:40 p.m. And next, for those that thrive in the fully online and want to continue that pathway, those options will stay true for them. Their location will be a home or a learning space of their choice. They will have increased flexible sessions and online options within their dynamic environment and their flexible day that they build out each morning. Our online social connections will continue to be robust, and they will have the opportunity to choose for those Flex and Connect days if they want to do the in-person option or online. And as well, they'll have the opportunity to participate in those family field trips. And then next up is the schedule for the fully online. It's really complex. They can choose anywhere they want to be. They'll log in through their school-issued iPad from a location of their choice, and the school hours remain the same, 8 a.m. to 2:40 p.m. So next, virtual EDU, as we mentioned, is first in the state. The things that make it first is that we are the first public non-charter that has accreditation for a comprehensive program for all the grades, K-12, and offering the two pathways, online and blended. And we're doing this to further personalize and augment the learning experiences based on what our families have told us and what research is telling us. So under the umbrella of virtual EDU, being one family, students can personalize their learning pathways that best meet their needs so they can get what they need to be their best selves. Now, a little bit about what's happening in our current virtual EDU. Our school culture, there's this discourse about online learning that it feels cold, students feel isolated, they feel lonely, they feel disconnected from peers. Our school culture data tells us otherwise. but for how we're structuring our space. So you can see for both elementary and secondary students, in our panorama results, we have a really strong sense of belonging. And our students are feeling really connected to adults that they are interacting with on a daily basis. Beautifully also for our secondary scholars, you can see a really high percentage, 86%, where our students are self-identifying that they feel encouraged to think more deeply about race-related and social issues in our learning pathways. Next, the big decisions, right? The schools need to be able to be funded and operate. So we wanted to highlight what our current snapshot is with virtual EDU enrollments for this year, and then we'll transition into our plans for next year. So we started the year with 94 students on August 29th. Our current enrollment is 153. So you can see through the school year, we've have had a 62% increase in our enrollment. One of the things that our enrollment team and the virtual EDU staff has learned is that enrollment in online settings do not follow predictable patterns like our in-person schools. So we don't have the same kind of cycle of open enrollment by January 17th and kindergarten registration. Kids and families are coming to us when that is what they're needing. And so we're having ongoing enrollments throughout the year, sometimes 5 and 6 scholars within a week. Our open enrollment at the elementary level is 57%. At the secondary level is 43%. And then there are some student demographics on the right side as well. So all in all, as a summary of our plans for next year, we will continue to offer 13 grades of virtual learning. There are 2 personalized learning pathways, fully online and the blended option, and all of that is part of our one virtual EDU family. From here, I'm going to pass the mic to Jolene to tell a little bit about our marketing plan and the strategic research that we're doing for long-term enrollment.
Sure. Good evening. It's really great to be here with you tonight to share some of the market research findings that we came up with last spring, and then also how they dovetail into the plan that Tiffany and team have built and how we're going to move them forward. So last spring, I think a lot of you know, we did some kind of extensive market research to better understand what our families would want from an online school, virtual EDU. We did a mix of qualitative and quantitative research, looking at our virtual EDU families, our Hopkins staff, and different members of the community and beyond that we felt like would be a good fit for virtual EDU to test out different concepts and messaging. So there are a lot of key insights that came from this research, and I think one of the things that's really exciting about the model that's being brought forth is it really aligns very well with what we were being told initially. This is your best course forward. This is your best strategy. So one of the things these are the 4 things that stood out, I think, the most. There were some other insights as well that we could share. But the first is that the families who were enrolled in Hopkins Virtual EDU had a really strong and favorable experience and felt like it was a great program. So that also aligned with this also favorable perception of Hopkins Public Schools in general, which was really exciting. The researchers really thought the online landscape was really ripe, and even though it felt like it was everywhere at the time, especially last year, like everybody had an online program, they felt like in a lot of ways it was really untapped, and there was a lot of different ways that we could go with this. The one thing that stood out very strongly was that parents overwhelmingly wanted a flexible model that included a blend of in-person learning and also online learning, and they wanted that to be flexible. There is certainly a niche audience for an online-only pathway. We know that. We're living that. But we also know that the market research told us very strongly our most viable audience is this blended audience that wants a little bit of both. And the other, I think, really exciting insight, and you spoke to this a little bit earlier, Tiffany, is that this is really an opportunity to change how we do education. It's really a way to create a whole new model, and that came out pretty strongly in the research. In the advisement that we received from the research, there's two things that kind of came forward really clearly. One, again, to create a permanent blended online option, however we were able to do that. I think at the time we were doing the research, we imagined, Tiffany, you were ahead of us, like we imagined something where perhaps you would take some classes in like an online module, but then you would attend an in-person school that already existed. And we hadn't even dreamt of this whole K-12 experience, that would be one school and would be providing both in one community. And what's really interesting is the second recommendation was to consider using space differently within buildings for blended interaction. And your model, I think, really does that very nicely. So it doesn't feel like it, but we've actually only been at this since February, but we've been at it really aggressively and really hard. I remember like having a meeting with Tiffany that I think was scheduled for 30 minutes, and it went for like 2 hours because she started telling us about this blended model. And we're like, wait, what? Like what? Like all in one, and it took us a bit to like understand what we were hearing, and it was really exciting. So we immediately sort of thought, well, okay, we need an enrollment and marketing strategy, and we need a different enrollment and marketing strategy than what we thought we were going to need, because at the time we were kind of going down a different pathway. So we spent a lot of February doing a research review, looking at the research that had already been conducted and what we can learn from it. We brought in our marketing partners, Frankie and Farella, for some help with us. In March, we got a lot done. We did something called persona building, where we kind of develop some of our key audiences and the personalities that they have and what messages would most appeal to those audiences. And then we tested those messages to get a sense of their viability. We've made some soft announcements to internal audiences, you being one of them, and also Hopkins leaders, virtual EDU staff, and virtual EDU families. And then prior to spring break, we're going to let Hopkins staff know, and then after spring break, we're going to go pretty hard on both an external and internal communication campaign that we have at a high level right now and are going to bring it to the ground pretty quickly. So our objectives of this work are beyond virtual EDU. We really want to use this to position Hopkins Public Schools and virtual EDU as one of the most innovative and effective school districts in Minnesota. So this is a way to really showcase, like, we do things differently in Hopkins, and we have a really bold vision, and we're going to live it out. Obviously announcing that the K-12 virtual EDU is the first fully accredited online plus in-person school. I don't think many districts know how to do what Tiffany has managed to do, and I think it would take them a while to catch up. That's just my opinion.
I like that
And then
opinion.
we want to elevate the public perceptions of Hopkins schools and see this is a good avenue for doing so. And so we have big goals. We have really big goals, but I think we kind of have to, because we're trying to scale something. So our intention is to retain 70% of the families that we currently have. And on top of that, we would like to gain 200 additional scholars for next year. We do believe that there will be some families within the Hopkins Public Schools district where this will appeal to them, where they will desire something different than the traditional school system is able to offer them and will maybe opt in. But we expect most of our scholars to come outside the district. Again, for that same reason, really feeling like my district and really no other district offers this opportunity. And so I'm going here to virtual EDU, because we're not only the first in the state, we're the only. So that is our goal. We'd also like to work with different districts across the metro area in specific and see how we can partner with them for sort of a shared ADM partnership where they can participate in virtual EDU, but maybe retain their enrollment in their home district, which they may want to do for sports, for family, for whatever reason. So we're working out that. And we'll leave you with this great statement: Hopkins Virtual EDU is leading the future of education. and open to questions.
What questions do you have or opportunities for clarification?
Well, thank you so much. This is so exciting. And you were talking about how Dr. Tiffany brought this idea to you and that it turned a half-hour meeting into a 2-hour meeting. I mean, I think that's why futurist is in her title, right?
Yeah.
Is because she has this, this vision. It's really exciting to see this moving toward implementation. I'll open it up to my board colleagues to see what questions and comments you have.
Chair Westmoreland,
Yes.
I'm curious about where these students are located. You say it's open enrollment, but how far away are they in?
Some of our current open enrollment
Yeah.
students. Some are local in the metro within other districts. Some are up by Lake Mille Lacs. I dropped off an iPad there at the beginning of the year for a
Really?
student. Some are in the southern part of the state, so they're kind of all over.
How did they find out about us?
Some of our families had been in Hopkins or Hopkins residents at one point in time.
Okay.
We have recently gotten a kindergartner from the Brainerd area that we're doing some learning about how they found out about us, that enrolled for next year. So as we welcome in and onboard people, we're seeking to learn what is their pathway that they are discovering Hopkins and Hopkins
Sure.
Virtual EDU. But so we have kind of a variety of spaces, a lot of metro right now, but I anticipate that'll move to greater Minnesota as we grow our program.
All right. You've had pretty aggressive growth this year. How do you account for that? How did that happen?
Word of mouth is one.
Okay.
Another is being responsive when a family comes. They're coming to and seeking online for reasons, and those reasons are time-bound and sensitive. And so being able to welcome them in and onboard them in a relatively smooth process with high levels of service from the enrollment team and from our onboarding staff has really been crucial. And then that is messaged to their peers who have similar life situations, and that's, I think, contributing to that growth over time.
Terrific. Thank you.
Thank you.
Word of mouth. I had just a quick question about, excuse me. I'm really excited to hear about the blended learning pathway. It's something I personally, as a parent, have been interested in exploring for my student in the district. And I'm just wondering how that's going to work for families that are current Hopkins families, but in, the bricks and mortar. How's that messaging going to go out? And then, what would be the process? And given Steve's question, I was also wondering about that blended learning pathway. You mentioned that transportation would be provided, and then I'm wondering how far afield is that going to be provided?
Let Jolene speak first to the messaging to internal families, and then I can respond to the transportation piece.
Yeah, we actually have two sets of messaging that we just reviewed today. One's external and one's for internal families. They're similar, but what maybe is different is I feel the internal is maybe we called it a little gentler. It's a little more informative based. We certainly want to let our families know of this option, and if this is a fit, we want them to opt into it for sure. We also don't want to pull from families, we don't want to necessarily recruit our families in that where they're not sure if it's a fit or they're happy where they are, where we might be more competitive in our marketing externally. In terms of the radius, our market research tells us that families probably would drive up to 40 miles for a blended model, especially if it was only like a few days a week and the commitment was not, 4 days or something like that. So there's some evidence to suggest we've got a pretty big radius. We are located or will be located on the Meadowbrook side of the district, which does tend to pull the most open enrollment.
Additionally, with the transportation, that will be provided to in-district families, not our friends up by Lake Mille Lacs or Brainerd
Boston.
area. But speaking to, or adding a layer to what Jolene had mentioned, one of our components with our internal messaging, we want to generate awareness. One of the things we learned this year is we actually got some students who were Hopkins families, they are Hopkins residents, they went to an online program outside of our district because they didn't know about us. And so we have since lovingly welcomed them back, but that's one of the reasons why we want to be really mindful in just curating that awareness within our Hopkins community. And so that we have, like, if a family is looking to make a change, they know they have an option here in Hopkins, and they don't need to go elsewhere for it. So part of that is retaining families within Hopkins, even if it is a switch between schools. But our messaging is gentler for our internal families, and it's really to cultivate awareness. Whereas our messaging for external, for that 80% goal of open enrollment is much more robust and a little bit more aggressive in some ways. Like,
Or
come to us.
targeted, or
Targeted would be a greater word.
Yeah, I used aggressive first, I put it in your head. Yeah. We mean targeted.
Both.
Both, yeah.
Great,
Both
thank
can
you.
be true, yeah. Thank you.
I have a question.
Sure.
I think that this kind of blended model is school of the future, right? I mean, it's certainly been mentioned in several settings as a way to take advantage of technology and the reality of life in the century that we live in. And so I feel like eventually there could be some very strong internal demand. And I'm wondering if there's a point where either virtual EDU would be like, wow, we're overwhelmed, or if this is just one step in eventually moving these kind of blended options into, especially at some secondary schooling.
I love that question, thank you. So part of our strategic planning team was the 1 year, so next year, then 3 years out, and then 5 years out, and growing a blended option within an in-person school is in that strategic plan. So we're kind of the pilot site in some ways to build that capacity and that really robust alignment with our learning framework and our commitments with Vision 2031, so that we can then, within the Hopkins community, learn from each other, seek supplemental accreditation for our in-person sites so that they have the option to have some blended experiences within those communities as well. So it is in our growth plan over time for the district as a whole.
Could I add one follow-up to that? Is there legislative issues still that are standing in the way of moving that model into the, that was a somewhat of a rhetorical question, but moving that model into our secondary or in our in-person schools?
So there will, to do online experiences and blended learning experiences in our in-person schools, we would need to seek what's called supplemental accreditation. So virtual EDU has the comprehensive, and with that, it's much easier to obtain supplemental for other sites within the district, but I would support those school sites in securing that supplemental accreditation, and it's one of our project plans for next school year to enter that year-long process to obtain that for sites.
That's really interesting, and one little aspect of the larger board is there's an offshoot and several board members sit on the LAC, and they have a legislative action coalition and have a loose eyeball. This year's a very funding-heavy year, but have a loose eye on what's coming in the next few years. And what we've learned, and we have several people here who have done this work for many, many years, but if, legislative change is necessary, then it's like, we got to start that
Start now.
soon, right?
There
And
are
so-
current pathways for us.
Okay, that's great.
Within the current statute, so there are pathways for us to do that and grow to that to be inclusive of our in-person sites.
Okay.
So stick with the funding for now.
Yeah. We
Yeah,
are.
no one's veering off of that.
Yeah, I didn't figure so.
I
I have some curiosity around how people are grouped in both the fully online and the blended model. So excited to hear that we're using the Meadowbrook East. Is that what we're calling? Yes, the Meadowbrook East building. I think just from a governance perspective, there's been some curiosity around how we were going to eventually use that building. I know we've had discussions with the city of Golden Valley around traffic flow concerns and this type of thing, and I think that this just really is an appropriate use in terms of our needs as a district, and then also kind of gets at some of those larger community concerns around the use of that site. So I'm just thrilled to see that physical site being used. And I guess that piqued some curiosity for me around what the staffing looks like. Are there staff who are just working in the blended pathway, or do they work in both? Is there some multi-age grouping of students happening? Just kind of wondering about all of that.
All of that. So we worked quite extensively with Golden Valley last year to proceed with Meadowbrook East as a site, be mindful of the traffic considerations, be mindful of timing, stagger our start time with Meadowbrook. So all of those pieces have been ongoing and quite robust conversations to start to consider moving into Meadowbrook East and renovating it for that. Around the model, we do operate in a team teaching approach and a multi-age family style approach. So in the elementary, our students are grouped in a K-3 structure and a 4-6. They start and end their day in what's called a family pod, and that is mixed age. And then their sessions throughout the day are grouped by what they need at that moment in time. So wherever a child is on that learning continuum, that's where their small group is. So there's some whole group around the grade banded content, and then those small groups and live sessions are really focused on wherever they are in that competency of the skill or strategy in mathematics and literacy and in social studies or science. So we operate in that model. Staffing, we're in the middle of staffing process. So currently we have all of our children are all of our children. So 7 through 12, it is a team of 7-12 teachers with all of the licensure areas. And they design their project-based learning structures to meet standards and provide standard-based feedback. Same with the elementary. They operate as a K-6 team, and all of the teachers know robustly all of our students. They have their core small group that they start and end their day with, and then who they interact with throughout the day is based on what they need or their interests, even for WIN and school-wide enrichment.
Thank you. I am mindful of time. We have one more agenda item for the workshop. I also want to make sure that my board colleagues have the opportunity to ask any questions that you might have.
Chair Westmoreland, could I
Yes.
ask one more?
Yeah, absolutely.
Did I see correctly that your enrollment is 71% kids of color?
Yeah.
What do you think it is about virtual EDU that appeals to that cohort?
I can provide anecdotal.
Yeah.
We have not done robust qualitative or quantitative learning around that
Sure.
to date. But anecdotally, from some of our caregiver focus groups, our students that have opted into this choice program have felt that is meeting their safety and their wellness needs, as well as has allowed for them to experience more culturally relevant things during their day within their home, within their family, within their community. So that is an important topic that we want to do learning around currently and as we continue to grow, so that we can continue to provide culturally sustaining experiences.
Yeah, good, thank you.
And can you explain that term, culturally sustaining experiences or curriculum?
Yes. So there is, so we have culture, right? Our language, our faith, our ways of being. Culturally relevant teaching and learning experiences provide opportunities that are meaningful for and have robust connections to a particular culture or community. Culturally sustaining takes that one level further and helps students and community members feel and live out their full authentic self that honors their whole being, their whole ways of life and knowing and being, and it helps them sustain their authentic self and their community beliefs. Thank you.
That's good.
Well, this was such an exciting update, a really great way to start our evening together here at the board table. We just appreciate all of the work, and it certainly responds to a lot of the conversations we've had about online learning and virtual EDU here at this table, takes into consideration the needs of the community, and I can't wait to see what this looks like as we move into the implementation phase. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, leaders.
We will move into our next agenda item. I will turn it back to Dr. Mary Peary Reed to introduce our 2023-2024 budget discussion. We'll welcome Director Chapanduka to the table.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Chair Westmoreland. And, well, as we all might or should know, managing a budget of more than $100 million is a huge responsibility, a huge work stream that impacts not only the team of school finance experts that Torero works with, but also impacts our entire system. And so thank you for joining us at the table, Director of Business Services, Truro Chapanduka, and Assistant Superintendent Lightfoot, and our business data analyst, Pam Carmen. So what I'd like to share is that our Director of Business Services implored us to set up weekly budget meetings starting in the beginning of the year so that we could work collaboratively as school and district leaders to prepare for fiscal year 24. And we know that currently public school districts' fiscal future is pretty tenuous right now with declining or fluctuating enrollment, exacerbated by what we think will be an increase from the state, but that increase might also come with additional mandates, which might absorb some of that increase. So there's a lot of ambiguity that the team is managing, and yet the team has been able to produce school-based budgets for our school leaders and our department-based budgets for our departments. And we don't have that much time left, so without further ado, I'll introduce Torero and Nick and Pam and provide a short overview of budget update.
Thank you, Dr. Mary Reed. Good evening, Chair Westmoreland. Good evening, respective board members. Well, this is a continuation of our update we gave to the board at the last budget workshop and meeting. With me, I have Dr. Lightfoot and Pam. So what we're going to do is to actually start the conversation around timelines. So we have a couple components attached and related to this, one being the budgetary timelines, and the other component being the staffing process. Pam, are you able to project?
Is it that one? Which one of these?
Okay, so while this Pam is projecting our presentation, I wanted to give Dr. Lightfoot an opportunity to actually walk us through the staffing timelines, and then we'll also talk about the budgetary timelines, and then we'll go into some discussion around some of the changes we've made to the budget allocations for next year, around categorical allocations, and some of the anticipation, not knowing what the state will give as inflationary increases to the system, around some of the basic revenue. With that being said, I'll give the opportunity to Dr. Lightfoot.
Certainly, we can go to the next slide. We've been working on developing the budget and staffing process timeline that's here in front of you. And at our weekly budget meetings, we go through and review this with all of our administrative staff present. I think for the board, for those of you that have been part of that staffing process, you'll be aware that what we continue with is our budget work focused right now on tying out budgets, as you can see highlighted in the March 15th. We adopt the seniority list, and then we start to work on any communications that would be forthcoming for any staffing notifications or assignments. You'll see in April, as we finalize our budget tie-outs, we know what we will need for staffing, and if we have any changes in our staffing cadre that we need to identify, we bring that to you at the end of April and beginning of May. As you will note, we built in some extra time, given the staffing that we have right now with our 6th grade and 9th grade transition and the movement of those grades. You'll see that the information is set up to be delivered to you on the 9th, the board meeting at the 9th. And then we would follow through with our normal notification process of any reductions, and then would move forward accordingly with the timeline throughout the end of the year where you see the budget approval occurring. So that's the brief staffing, fast and furious.
Thank you for that, Dr. Lightfoot. And I'll share this presentation before the 7 o'clock board meeting with the board. So on the budgetary side, we are planning to actually finish our budget tie-outs by April 15th, with the anticipation that will be coming to the board with our preliminary fiscal year 23-24 first presentation, as well as our updated fiscal year 22-23 budgetary update. And this will lead us into May, where we'll do our first reading of the budget and the final budget approval on June 6th. So if you go to the next slide. So if we go back and again, how we've budgeted for this upcoming year, we've done it conservatively, and I know we did come to the board with CFAC recommendations. At the same time, not really knowing all the details around how the inflationary increase will look like. We decided to at least give allocations to our buildings so that they can start planning at a 0% increase. So it is 0% increase based on what we've calculated. As you can see on the pie chart, I have a breakdown of some of the assumptions we've used around what revenue coming from either the referendum or from states and other categorical look like. So currently we have about 15.1% coming out of our voter-approved operating referendum, which amounts to about $17.6 million. 4.7% or $5.4 million, that's location equity or local options, which is board approved. 12.9, about 11% is capital projects levy, which is voter approved. About $1.4 million is categorical achievement and integration. Again, those dollars are used as guided by the state. About 5.1 or 4.4% is compensatory revenue. And if you actually compare our compensatory revenue to previous year, we have had a bit of an increase for the upcoming year, just due to the way the state is piloting the application of benefits by accessing information from the Department of Human Services through Medicaid. That led to an increase of participation, meaning more dollars are coming to the district. And I don't know how this pilot will continue in the future, just knowing that the governor has approved the universal meals. So we are hoping that this will continue as the determination of how we receive compensatory revenue outside of the application for benefits. So that's amount to about $2 million in additional revenue out of compensatory, which is good for the district. And then we have about 0.3%, which is our learning English proficiency or English learners. 9.4% or $10.9 million is our special education. Even though the budget for special education is between $15 to $20 million, meaning that the difference is the cross subsidy coming from our general education. We have about $3 million or 2.6%, which is federal grants. And those federal grants are not factoring in any of the ESSA allocations, which will probably be carrying forward into next year and will be actually not available beyond that. About 0.4% is our extended time, which amounts to about $409,000. And the remainder, about $60 million, is our non-categorical revenue, which means our general education aid, which amounts to that $116.8 million. Then on the expenditures, about 56% or about $65 million is our salaries and wages. About 28.8 million dollars or 25% is benefits. About 15% or $70 million is our purchase services. About 3.3 million or 3% is our supplies. About 1.5% or $1.7 million is our capital expenditure. And about 1% or $1.5 million is other expenditures. So right now we do have a structurally balanced budget, meaning our expenditures are at $116.8 million at that 0% basic increase. So what I've done here on the next slide is just to show you, based on what we've allocated into the buildings, first starting with our predictable staffing model, which is based on ratios as a starting point for allocations into our buildings. And then at the department level, we're just using the actual expenditures. So when we start to look at that $160 million, how it's divided into where the funds are going, so about $67.1 million, which amounts to about 50% or 57% of our budget, is direct school allocations, either through the predictable staffing model or through categorical or operating allocations directly into the buildings. 37% or $43.6 million is district-wide allocations. These are allocations which are directly going into buildings, but being managed at the central office. So allocations like transportation, operations and maintenance, which covers things like custodians, utilities in our buildings, some of the district-wide initiatives around insurance, around other post-employment benefits, which may be managed at the central level, but feeding into the buildings, around some of our information technology and technological infrastructures. Which amounts to close to about 95% between direct allocations and district-wide allocations, and the remaining 5% or $6.1 million is department allocations or central office allocations around, business office and business services, management and governance, board allocations, human resources, some of the centralized special education allocations, that amounts to that 5%. So 95% are directly related to services in the buildings. 5% are allocated to departments who provide services to our buildings and our departments. So what I did, so that there's a better understanding around context in terms of what a 0% basic allowance increase mean. Again, as I highlighted at the beginning, which is at $116.8 million. So what we did is we take the $116.8 million revenue, we calculate based on the predictable staffing model, based on the increases around cost of living adjustment or consumer price index. We calculate the total cost within the general fund. And then any remaining dollars, we consider those to be discretionary dollars going into the building. So we take the total remaining dollar. So in the example I have here, after we had calculated all the expenditures, our remaining total what I would call surplus was about $3.3 million. So we take the $3.3 million, we divide by our total projected enrollment, which is 6,550 in this case, to determine an additional per pupil dollars. So in this case, we have $507. So we go to each building, we take their projected enrollment, we multiply by $507, we give those dollars into the building as discretionary, and building leaders and building staff will use those dollars based on priorities in their buildings to address some of the difference between our predictable staffing model and what we are projecting as our current revenue. So I did a couple examples around what this might look like in terms of what a 2% increase would look like. Because what will happen is, let's say we end up getting 2% increase based on our calculations. So let's say we end up getting 2% increase. It will bump our discretionary total allocations to about $3.7 million, meaning that buildings will get an additional allocation, and we'll also make some determination around what other district-wide initiatives look like. So in this case, a 2% increase will mean that our basic per student will be about $573, which is almost a $66 increase if we compare to a 0% into a 2%. And then I did this on a 3% as well as a 4%. I didn't want to be too ambitious by going to a 5%, so we'll probably just kind of leave it there. But the context to this is we have a structure where if we end up receiving additional dollars, there's a formula to distribute those dollars into the buildings. Just knowing that sometimes we end up getting this money around May or just before we pass the final budget for the district. The other thing I wanted to address, I know we don't have a lot of time left, is around some of the changes we've made, and I'm just going to talk about this from a fiscal standpoint, not from a program standpoint, because I know there have been some questions around some of the changes we have made. For example, in our middle schools, so for example, with our ADSIS, what is the definition of ADSIS, Dr. Letchford, do you remember? So we have our ADSIS allocations, which in the past have only been benefiting the junior highs, and next year those dollars are going to be district-wide. So that's one change, which may look a bit significant when you start to compare what has happened this year and in the past. And then we also have our title dollars, which in the past have benefited the elementary, the 4 elementary schools, because of the fact that the allocations are determined through the free and reduced. Title has become actually school-wide, and is being distributed across our system, both at the elementary and secondary level. So that's one of the changes which has happened going into next year, as well as achievement and integration. Not really a lot of changes in achievement and integration, except that there has been some strategies around how those dollars are used, and based on a plan. So the innovation design and planning team has been working with our buildings in trying to make sure that those plans are operationalized and the dollars are used for what they are supposed to do. And the other change, which definitely is significant as we go into fiscal year 23-24, is around the 6-9 grade configuration, with some of those movements with our students, as well as what we have seen with our enrollment and our reduction in enrollment. So there's a number of factors at play here, which might really look like it's very impactful, just because of the fact that there's so many things which are changing this coming year, which has not really happened in the past. With that, I'll stop and take any questions, but we will also be coming back to do the same presentation at the regular meeting.
Thank you.
ADSIS is Alternative Delivery of Special Instructional Services.
Thank you very much. So we have moved into our meeting time here, so I think it's best if we continue this conversation during the meeting. I know we have community members who are really interested in this conversation as well. That'll just allow us more time to get into some of the detail. We need a little bit of a break, so let's plan to meet back here at 7:10. We can welcome our community members who have entered the physical space here, and we will see our online community members back here at 7:10. Thank you. This meeting of the Hopkins School Board is called to order at 7:11 p.m. We will move into our open agenda portion of the evening of a practice that this board adopted at the beginning of this school year, was to go around the table and introduce ourselves so that our community members, both in the physical space with us and watching via the YouTube live stream, know who the decision makers are at this table who represent you. So we'll start with Director Hartland.
Certainly. Thank you, Chair Westmoreland. I am Rachel Hartland, and this is my second year on the board. It is my first term, so I'm one of the two newest members of the board. And I am very happy to see all of you members who are here in community, in person, and online today, and that'll do.
Hi, my name is Katie O'Shea Peterson. I have two kids at Meadowbrook. I have a 5th grader and a 6th grader.
Steve Adams, I'm in my 12th year on the board, and a proud father of 2 grown adult children who are Hopkins graduates.
Good evening. I'm Rhoda Mary Perry Reed, Superintendent. I have a 5th grader at Eisenhower. Actually, she'll be at West next year. And then I have a 9th grader at North, and my stepson works as a kindergarten para at Eisenhower.
I'm Jen Westmoreland, she, her pronouns. I currently serve as chair of this fantastic group of people. I have a student at Eisenhower Xinjiang, and I am a graduate of Hopkins High School.
Hello, everyone. I'm Shannon Andreessen. I parent 2, one current student at Hopkins West Junior High and a recent graduate from the district who is attending the University of Minnesota Twin Cities and doing very well thanks to the education received at Hopkins Public Schools. And I am in my 4th year serving on the school board, and really excited to see so many community members that I know here in the audience. So welcome.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tanya Khan. I have lived 12 years in the district. I also worked in the district, mostly at the high school. Both my kids graduated from Hopkins, and currently they're attending the University of Minnesota.
My name is Jason Russ. I am in my 2nd year, first term as a board member. I have 3 scholars, 2 4th graders, and 1 1st grader attending Tanglin Elementary.
We have fantastic student board representatives who will give their board reports in a while here, and so they can introduce themselves at that point, if that's okay with you. Okay, wonderful. So open agenda is the time during our board meetings when we receive public comment from our community. There are 2 ways to give public comment at our meetings. You can leave a voicemail before the meeting begins, and we will play that publicly, or you can visit us in person. And so we have some community members here with us in person tonight who wish to give public comment. I'll invite each one of you up to the table individually. So I have 4 public comment cards. Before doing so, I'll just read through our public comment guidelines that I read anytime community members come to give public comment. And then I will invite Brent Eckhoff up first, so you can be ready to come to the table. So individual comments will be limited to 3 minutes or less. Vice Chair Andreessen will be the timekeeper for public comment this evening. She will indicate to you when you have 1 minute left, because it's a very jarring experience, speaking from someone who used to give public comment quite frequently at government proceedings. And still does, actually. It's very jarring to all of a sudden be like, 10 seconds, what? So she's going to give you a 1 minute warning. Public comment is for input only. This is not a question-answer session, a time for debate, or a dialogue. Members of the school board will not respond directly to public comments that are made at this meeting. No specific action will be taken at this meeting in response to comments that are made or issues that are raised during the public comment period. If the board determines that action is appropriate, that action will occur at a future board meeting. A district representative may follow up with you after the meeting. The board chair will recognize one speaker at a time. Only those speakers who are recognized will be permitted to speak. Individuals who interfere with or interrupt speakers, the board, or the proceedings may be directed to leave. Personal attacks on any individual, including any other speaker during the public comment session, are unacceptable, as are obscenities or profanity. Persistence in making such remarks will end the individual's opportunity to address the board and may result in the individual being asked to leave. The board chair will rule out of order any statement that would violate state or federal law, school board policy, or the privacy rights of an individual. Minnesota's open meeting law prohibits the discussion of private educational data during an open meeting. Accordingly, during the public comment session, no person may discuss private educational data on an identifiable student. The open meeting law also requires the board to close a meeting for preliminary consideration of allegations against an employee. Accordingly, community members who have concerns about an employee or want to file a complaint or allegations against an employee are encouraged to contact the superintendent directly. Repeated violations of these time, place, and manner restrictions may also lead to the meeting being briefly recessed. Community members will have an opportunity to be heard within the limits of the law and the subject to the time, place, and manner restrictions above. And now that we've gotten through that, I'd like to welcome Brent Eckhoff to the table.
Chair Westmoreland?
Yes.
Could I just make a brief comment that we have two different sessions for public comment in our board proceedings. The first session we are enjoying right now are for comments that on topics that are on the agenda. We also have one at the end of our meeting for those who wish to comment on things that are not on the night's agenda. Just wanted
Thank
to
you
make
for the
that clear.
clarification. Thank you. And your time will start when you start, Mr. Eckhoff. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. My name is Brent Eckhoff. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a current language arts teacher, former AVID teacher. I'm also currently an HEA building representative, and I've been in Hopkins now for 16 years, almost to the day I came on in a weird time. When I started in Hopkins, I didn't know much about the district because I come from northern Minnesota, where the outstate folks can't sometimes be bothered with city issues. I chose Hopkins because my late wife, who is a graduate of Edina High School, insisted that I take the Hopkins job because, in her words, they know what they're doing. She was right. She was absolutely right. It's been an honor and a privilege to be a part of the school system with such forward-thinking philosophies. Working here has truly made me a better person, 100%. And I've been fortunate to experience the journey that has led us to a place in which we can implement things like personalized learning practices, restorative practices, and develop our own teaching in ways that promote cultural differences and anti-racist ideals. We've heard a lot about Vision 2031 over the past few years, and we all want to go on record saying that we are completely on board for the goals outlined by the focus groups a few years back, of which I was a part of. We also know that the path to this new reality will likely be full of challenges and surprises, and it will be critical for all of us to try a number of different things to understand what's important and what works for students to reach their potential. And it's through that process of trying new things that the staff at West Junior High felt compelled to speak about what we've learned. We at WJH have been and continue to work from a place that puts students first in our planning to make them self-directed learners while developing our own practices to fit the ever-evolving role of the modern-day teacher, which is why we have become anxious in the face of projected budgetary issues. Now, while we recognize that all buildings likely face the same challenges we face, we're here to speak to our specific needs. And to that end, my colleagues and I felt that we must speak up about how the current staffing model looks like it could hinder our efforts to sustain and continue the excellent work that we've done. My colleague, Sammy Peterson, will speak next. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'd like to welcome Sammy Peterson to the table. Welcome, yes.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you for having us here. My name is Sammy Peterson. I use she, her pronouns. I am a science teacher, built member, department chair, and GSA advisor at West. This is my 4th year in Hopkins, and I've spent the whole time at West with some brief time at North my first year teaching. In my time working here, I've come to realize how lucky I am to work for and with such innovative, creative, and highly invested educators. Many of our staff, both those here with me tonight and those who were not able to make it, chose and value their work at Hopkins because we're deeply invested in living out the Vision 2031 core values: authentic inclusivity, optimistic innovation, and love. The Vision 2031 outcomes outline that Hopkins strives to be a destination district for both staff and students. Quote, first choice, we will be known as a destination district for the state of Minnesota and beyond, the #1 choice of students for their education from birth to age 21. Quote, teachers' first choice, we will be an employer for the best, brightest, and most passionate teachers who reflect our students' demographics, end quote. We also know that around the country, teachers and students are more mobile than ever, with high rates of attrition and struggles with retention. The reality is that we are losing amazing educators as well as families to the lack of classroom support and staggering class sizes. As a teacher, if I had a choice between a school district with base level class sizes of 32 and 38, there would be significant draw to smaller class sizes because I know I'd better be able to meet the needs of my students. The same logic follows with our families. We've been working hard to get programming up and running to support vulnerable students and retain marginalized staff. Some of these programs, some district-wide and some specific to West, include staff affinity groups, GSAs, Unified Club, RTI Reading, and RTI Math. Our community school coordinator, Lindsay Leisman, has helped us connect with community partners such as Change Equals Opportunity, My Health, and ICA Food Shelf to provide medical, dental, vision, barbershop, food, and after-school homework help, among other essential services. Unfortunately, many of these programs would be some of the first to go with budget cuts, either slashing the program budget or putting more pressure and responsibility on already overworked teachers that run these programs. I want to wrap up by emphasizing how much buy-in comes from our side of things. I can't imagine a district that better aligns with my personal values and teaching philosophy, and have felt very, very lucky to be here. In the past 4 years, I've worked alongside some of the most inclusive, adventurous, innovative, humble, and passionate people I've ever met. Some of them are still working at West and other places in the district, but a significant number have moved on to other districts or other professions. My colleagues and I believe strongly in Vision 2031, but feel that our hands are a bit tied in terms of making this vision a reality. We believe that factors like paraprofessional and clerical support, as well as reduction in class sizes, would have a significant impact on staff and family retention and recruitment. My colleague Alicia will speak next. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you very much. I'd like to invite Alicia Beebe to the table. And whenever you're ready.
All right. Hello, my name is Alicia Beebe. I have been at West for 23 years. Currently, I'm the Math RTI lead, a team leader, math department chair, and on the build team. I've seen the Hopkins School District and West go through many changes. I am so proud of the work we as a school have done around IB programming, less restrictive RTI programs, and restorative culture. I have never felt a need to speak up till now. I have felt the district was doing their best to support students, teachers, and family. That feeling has changed this year. A core value of Vision 2031 is vigilant equity. If our district values equity, then the way we spend our money needs to reflect that value. With our projected enrollment at West falling slightly short of the 600 threshold of the district's predictable staffing model, we are funded more similarly to the elementary schools in our district for paraprofessional, clerical, and counselor support. Our physical building is bigger, our class sizes are bigger, and the mental health needs of middle school students are rising. With class sizes funded at 38-1, about 20% of our students with IEPs and decreased funding for paraprofessional, counselor, and clerical support with the PSM model, students will not get the support they need to be successful next year. We have seen that when students are not properly supported, they struggle to engage with learning and can display unexpected behavior. These behavior affect their learning as well as the learning environment. West has made huge strides this year in being able to support our students. This year has been a breath of fresh air after the trials of last year. Important programs making a difference are like RTI Reading, RTI Math, behavior interventions are facing significant reductions next year. For example, our RTA programs have gone from receiving state ADSES dollars of about $400,000 to $90,000 with no plan to replace that essential resource. This is a 78% decrease in a single year. We understand that the ADSES dollar distribution was adjusted to be more equitable across the district, but that impact on our support programs is devastating. Our ability to bounce back in spite of this cut is even more limited because of all the other cuts due to the PSM model that affect class sizes, safety, and other essential parts of supporting our students. IB is another way that West is supporting the pillar of vigilant equity. IB is growth-focused, not deficit-focused framework where inclusion and diversity is valued. We are an IB World School, but the district currently is not providing any funds toward a coordinator. The IB coordinator is critical in keeping the whole building moving forward with fidelity, with new staff, and the 6-8 transition. Even with personalized learning and differentiated instruction, general education teachers cannot meet the needs of all their students in the classroom without support. This is not vigilant equity. We believe that factors like paraprofessional clerical support, reduction in class sizes, and IB coordinator would have a significant impact on our ability to support all of our students. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Like, wow, look at that, right on time. I'd like to invite Taylor Harris to the table, please.
Good evening. After what my colleagues have said, I'm here really just to wrap up some of our main talking points and bring together our message. My name is Taylor Harris. I use he, him pronouns. I am a social studies teacher at West Junior High. I'm also a parent of a first grader at Gatewood Elementary. I've been at West Junior High and Hopkins for 5 years now. We want to acknowledge that this is a hard time for our district. This is a hard time in education. Students' needs are higher than they have ever been in my 15 years teaching. I have not seen the kinds of needs, especially last year, that students have shown in terms of mental health. That being said, West Junior High has unique challenges. We are a very big physical building with a staff that is highly dedicated to our students and to the mission of our school. We are very concerned that staff cuts in intervention, in the SES team, in RTI, in reading and math is going to have a huge detrimental effect on our students and our abilities to provide the kind of world-class education that Hopkins hopes to provide. We are concerned that we are not going to be able to spend our discretionary funding in classrooms and instead have to use that on clerical, on admin, and other staff that's going to continue to saddle us with outrageous class sizes of 38 students, which is simply too many if we hope to achieve the kind of goals that we have laid out in our Vision 31 program. We're also concerned about safety issues in our building if we cut clerical staff, if we cut SES team members, and we cut instructional paras for special ed and other supports for students. We want to make sure that we have a budget that prioritizes student experiences, particularly intervention support, safety, and reasonable class sizes. I already said that. As a parent of a student in the district, we chose Hopkins and specifically Gatewood and West Junior High because we believe Hopkins is a district with a mission and have faith in the amazing people who are carrying out the innovative vision and making that a reality at these schools. Unfortunately, at every level, we are concerned that the shortfalls in short-term funding of our program is hindering the reality of our long-term vision of providing a world-class education for all students. As a staff, we are aligned with the values of our district and the goals of providing supportive and inclusive education for all of our students. We hold ourselves to very high standards, and it breaks my heart and the heart of many of my colleagues to see the dreams that we have shared drifting away because of misguided budget priorities. We cannot be expected to do more with less forever, but we fear that there is a feedback cycle of losing families as
We're at
we
3 minutes.
provide less services for the students that need them most. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you to all of our public commenters for joining us this evening. Next, we'll move on to our reports. We will start with our student board representatives' reports. We have 2 student board reps at the table tonight, and I'll turn it over to you.
I'm the sophomore representative for today's report. I'm going to talk about what happened this month since it's been a while since I've been here. This month, Pro Start had a competition in St. Paul, and they placed 4th place out of 14. They made a ceviche, I think that's how you pronounce it, steak, cake, and a crepe. To some, 4th place may not have been like a big deal, but to them, like it was the teacher's first year and the student's first time. So 4th place was like a big thing for them. The Black History Showcase was not this month specifically, but it was the day before this month started, and there was amazing performances and the food was delicious. It was a fun experience to go, and I 100% recommend if anyone is thinking about attending next year, if it happens next year. The sophomores took their reading MCAs and their practice ACTs test. For the sophomores, like I think the last time we took our MCAs was maybe like 6th grade because like COVID like restricted us, so we couldn't take it like in 8th grade and like at the end of 7th grade. So it's been a while since we last took ours. So I mean, it was like nice to get back into like the test setting again. Orchestra had 2 concerts this month, the Spotlight concert and the District concert. The Spotlight concert was in the auditorium, and they played with an experienced musician. The District concert was also in the auditorium, and there were other schools like Minnetonka, Wayzata that came. After they performed, they got pointers from like a violinist, which was really helpful for students who want to continue doing orchestra like in future years. And band also had a concert this month. The girls' basketball team had made it to state, so students had the choice to pay to go on Wednesday or stay in school. Also, today, the 9th graders from North Junior High came to get a tour of the high school. It was fun for the sophomores to see all their 9th grade teachers because, like, you know, it's been a year. And, like, many people, like, during passing time stopped to chat with their, like, 9th grade teachers, and it was, like, just a nice reunion. Students also got papers delivered to them telling them that they were a potential link room leader. Apparently like a month ago, like teachers were nominating students on who they believe would be a leader and who would be able to like assist sophomores and freshmen when they came up to the high school for orientation. For students that want to like do it Wednesday through Friday, like there's gonna be more information available for them to like find out more about it. And to wrap this all up, term 3 is coming to an end. So like these past 2 weeks, we had like a lot of finals and summatives, but this just means like, you know, we're 75% of the way through the school year, so.
It's like a really positive way of looking at it. Thank you so much. What an information-rich report. Yes, exactly. What an information-rich report, and it is very cool to hear the follow-up information on the Pro Start competition because we had a scholar who was preparing to cook the dessert for that competition join us on via Google Meet like a month ago now. It was 2 meetings ago. So hearing how all of that turned out is really wonderful. And we've seen pictures of various things that you have you just shared with us in the report. Not people taking the MCAs. We don't need to see pictures of that. But no, but all the other things you shared in the report. So it was really great to hear your take on it. So thank you so much. Oscar, we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Chair Westmoreland. Is this on?
I don't think it is.
Now?
There we go. Yep.
Thank you, Chair Westmoreland. I'm Oscar Wolf, the Senior Student Board Representative. I've got 3 issues I'd like to update on today. The first is not quite as fun as Samia's report, but it has really dominated the past 24 hours, so I think it would be irresponsible not to bring it up. Yesterday, a student at the high school posted a photo of a gun, and that was interpreted by many students to be threatening. We had a lot of students absent from the high school today, presumably because of that incident. And I've heard different perspectives from all the students I've talked to. Some people think that the response has been okay, but I actually think that administration responded to this in the best way they possibly could have. They sent an email out late last night notifying us that they did not believe there was an immediate threat, but that they would be taking all the necessary precautions. There was a police presence today at the high school, so a really unfortunate and unsettling event, but in my opinion, the response actually was what it should have been. Moving on to something a bit more fun, was the Legislative Action Coalition Day at the Capitol, which was a couple weeks ago now. From the student perspective, I thought it went really, really well, as I'm sure a lot of the people here at the table who were there can attest to. We met with a lot, if not all, of the legislators who represent Hopkins, and almost without fail, they agreed with the agenda, with the platform of the Legislative Action Coalition. They were all on board for universal funding for school lunches, as we've seen, as you probably know, that recently passed. And they all seem to be, yes, and they all seem to be on board as well for adjusting education funding to inflation. So I would say that that day was definitely a success and bodes quite well for the future. Finally, we did have Step Up Day today, and I believe tomorrow as well. Today was the 9th graders, tomorrow is the 8th graders. And it did remind me of an issue that I brought up here probably a couple months ago now, and that is extracurriculars. As I'm seeing these swarms of students come into the school, I'm wondering, do they have any idea of the clubs that are offered? My brother happens to be a freshman this year. He came to the high school today, and when we got home, I asked him 2 questions. First, I said, do you know what extracurriculars are offered at the high school? He said no. So my follow-up question was, do you know how to find what extracurriculars are offered at the high school? And to that, he also said no. I find that to be quite problematic. We do have a lot of extracurriculars at the high school, but people have no idea where to find them. The list that is being used for extracurriculars is still the one that I created for the club fair, which is not fully accurate. For example, we had yearbook photos a couple days ago for each club, and the HEF grant committee was listed as one of the clubs that was going to take a yearbook photo because they had a booth at the club fair. So just silly mistakes, and I don't think that 8th and 9th graders really want to be signing up for a grant committee.
You don't know that, Oscar.
We don't know, but yeah. For clubs like DECA, which are really, really good at preparing people for things that take place after high school, I have had more people than I can count ask me how to sign up for it when it's already too late. That's not a club that you can just join mid-year. It's a competition, and if you miss that first round, that's it. So I really think that we need to be far more proactive and far more structured in telling people, especially the upcoming underclassmen, what extracurriculars are available. That just needs to be, on the whole, more organized. I do believe we have Grace online today.
Oh.
None of our TVs are on.
But that wraps up everything I've got for today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Steve, I'm wondering if there's a way that we can get Grace on the screen so that she can do her board member report. There we go.
Okay.
Hi, Grace.
Hi, Grace.
Hi. Sorry I'm not able to make it to you guys today, but I am here in the virtual space nonetheless with a couple updates for you guys. So just really quickly to Oscar's point about club participation, it is kind of universally known throughout the club world, whether you talk to participants in club or club founders and club presidents or like leaders of clubs. We already see junior and sophomore participation dwindling and declining in basically every single aspect except for sports. As we all know, sports are, of course, very important and a very big aspect of the Hopkins life. But I mean, even relating personally just to the SBRs, the student board representatives, half of my friends don't even know what we are, what we do. And considering that this is what I believe a pretty important club, and I'm sure you guys would all agree, it's kind of a little bit disheartening that even some of the people that I know very closely and personally aren't entirely sure what it is I do every other Wednesday, or sorry, not Wednesday, every other Tuesday for about 4 hours. So I think a updated club list is definitely needed and something that we should work on admin with. In other news, talent show auditions for our annual talent show are to be hosted on the 23rd during all of the blocks except for 3rd, obviously, because that is our lunch. Scholars should come with about a 3 to 4 minute audition where they will be selected from a panel, or excuse me, by a panel to participate. Course registration closes soon for next year, so everyone who has not been placed in courses or placed themselves in courses will be meeting with their counselor shortly. And then in academic testing news, as Samia brought up, pre-SAT or pre-ACT testing happened for sophomores, and the actual ACT happened for juniors on the 14th. I myself took it, and I feel as though it went okay. That was not the resounding claim from everyone. But again, we know this, the ACTs are very hard tests to take, no matter what year, no matter what circumstance. But yeah, that happened that week, and then the girls' basketball game was the next day, so it was a very nice little reward for those of us that took the ACT. And then my last piece of news is a committee was formed from some scholars and Dr. Cool to discuss the IB grade changes, if they're happening or if they are not. Our first meeting is tomorrow. I myself am on that committee, as are other juniors, seniors, and sophomores, I believe. So yeah, we are very excited to get the ball rolling in that regard as well.
Thank you so much, Grace. Oscar.
Chair Westmoreland, thank you. I did think of 2 more things to add based on what Grace said.
Great.
She mentioned athletics being slightly different from, I was saying, extracurriculars or clubs, and that is a distinction that's worth making. Athletics are not having the same issues that clubs are, for lack of, I'm just going to say clubs. When I'm saying clubs, non-athletic. They're not having the same issues because emails about athletics are regularly sent out, and because it's more structured, people already know what's available. Those lists are there, they're reliable, people know how to do it. It's also worth noting that athletics are funded, and clubs are only funded if they get it specially. I talked about that at length when I brought this up last time, but unless they're getting a grant, they have nothing. So that limits how clubs are able to get members on their own. The only organized way this year that clubs have gotten any marketing was the club fair, and that's just not enough. Firstly, that takes place quite a bit into the school year when people are already started to be settled in, and they're not necessarily looking for new things to join. And also, it's just not enough. One short conversation with somebody sitting at a booth, maybe handing out free candy, is not enough to convince you to start dedicating significant time to something. There has to be more communication earlier in the year so that people are actually ready to commit.
Thank you both for this insight about extracurriculars and the distinction between sports and clubs and kind of some of the nuance there. It's really important for us to know. And then, Oscar, I wanted to thank you for providing your perspective on how our leaders handled the situation today. Dr. Mary Perry Reed was in contact with the board about it, and it's important for us to understand how it was perceived by students as well. So I appreciate you bringing that forward. Appreciate all 3 of you, and wondering if my board colleagues have any questions or comments for our student board reps.
Chair Westmoreland?
Yes.
I just had a quick follow-up question about something that isn't going to be an issue any longer, but I've always found, did you find problems with 9th graders really not having access to the different activities and clubs that are available at the high school? Like, I'm thinking specifically of Math League and things like that, that typically 9th graders would have access to.
I would say absolutely. Like I just said, the only real outreach that every single club has access to is that club fair, which now they'll have that, but they have not ever had that in the past. Ninth graders this year were not able to go to that club fair. So I would say it's definitely an issue, and the issue of transportation, which, like you said, won't be an issue anymore. But I mean, I remember when I was a freshman, I was involved in theater, and I had to walk across the parking lot, which wasn't a huge inconvenience, but I mean, there were no ninth graders from West when I did it because it was just too much of an inconvenience. So ninth graders have definitely been the hardest hit from the lack of structure and organization and communication with extracurriculars. I think that that disparity might go away next year, but the overall issue will not, unless action is taken.
Thank you.
This helps us think too about how we might better communicate what is arguably the coolest club, which is the student board representatives to the Hopkins School Board. As Grace said, I mean, Grace did a great sell there. You know, every Tuesday night you get to spend 4 hours hanging out with us. Thank you very much. Thanks to all three of you. We will move on to our superintendent's report with Dr. Mary Peary-Reed.
Thank you, Chair Westmoreland. And Steve, should I project from the laptop here? Thank you. Okay, well, first I want to greet our board members and also thank all of our educators from West and also from Eisenhower. Thank you for being here this evening, and thank you to our scholars for your board reports and for always providing candid feedback. And we're really going to have to work on the club and activities issue because I remember you brought it up before at the board table. So I'm a little disappointed that it hasn't yet been organized, and so please hold us accountable for doing that. So, and as you mentioned, DECA, we would like to congratulate the 31 Hopkins scholars who competed at the annual Minnesota DECA State Career Development Conference. Many of the students received state recognition at the competition, and 10 students will compete at the international conference next month in Florida. So good luck, Royals, and that's a really wonderful club for our students to consider being a part of. So we have to get the information out there so that they can. Also, congratulations to our girls basketball team who won second place in the state tournament. The final game was Saturday night, and it was a full house, so probably many of you were there. It was a really stressful game to watch, and I can't imagine how stressful it was to play in that game. Our girls have fought really hard and played really hard this entire season, so we want them to know, and also their coach, Tara Starks, and assistant coaches to know that we're very proud of them and we've supported them the whole way. Second place is a big deal, so congratulations to our Lady Royals. And as our students mentioned, today was 9th grade step-up day at the high school. 9th graders walked from North and then met their future classmates from West who were bussed over. The rising sophomores were divided into groups of about 20, so mixed North and West in each group, and then took a tour provided by Hopkins High School students. And then the future high schoolers filed into the auditorium to listen to a message from Principal Ballard and to also hear insights about life at Hopkins High School from a student panel, and the students did a really great job. They did talk about getting involved in sports and in clubs and activities, so I'm glad that invitation was there, and now we do have to mechanize that. So I thought that the entire experience inspired hope for next year. Our Hopkins High School band musicians are doing great things. The lineup for the Pops concert this past Friday was really amazing. LMPM played a new feature. The jazz band performed. Also, the alumni jazz and symphonic bands wowed the audience. Professional guest performers included Abby Wolf, Joshua Holmgren, and Dessa. Congrats to Nora Tycast for her brilliance, truly her brilliance in cultivating musicianship in our scholars and also gathering all of these guest conductors for an amazing set of performances. Our very own Dr. Camphy, principal at West Junior High, performed at her school's annual variety show last week. I think Donna was here earlier, right? Did Donna and Leanne sing together? They did. Awesome. So clearly there's something really wonderful about having all 600 plus students gathered together in the same multi-purpose space, cheering on their peers as they got up and bravely took a huge risk. So thank you to all of the students who demonstrated or displayed a talent on stage in front of their peers. And we want to also thank Miss Filippo and Sarah Coffey for organizing the event. Students at Eisenhower Elementary, and I'm glad I have these updates in this report because we didn't know that West and Eisenhower would be here. We don't have time to do a report on every school, so I'm really happy that these were included. So this was the Imagination Fair at Eisenhower Elementary, and if you walked into the multi-purpose space there, then what you would have seen is students and families milling about and being really in awe of the very cool projects and displays of student research, everything from dinosaur zoos to simulations of erupting volcanoes, how to make slime, of course, and explorations of Russian and Indian cultures, and lots more. So that was a really fantastic event, and I think all students, kindergarten through grade 6, can display a project. Speaking of tapping into student curiosity, passion, and ideas, we're not the only ones hearing about the drive that students at Glen Lake have demonstrated in their months-long fundraising effort for an accessible playground. The construction company Mortensen contacted Principal Radel and Miss Julian and invited students to their workplace. After a company-wide tour, 5 students presented in a live stream to 600 Mortensen employees about their efforts to raise money for the accessible playground. The students then sat on a panel with their teacher, principal, and a couple of parents to field questions from the Mortensen employees. What a great opportunity for students to develop the graduate traits of global mindedness, critical thinking, and having a strong voice. Our Kids in Co-lead at Gatewood Elementary, her name is Marcia Curley. She creates a really amazing environment of enrichment and fun for her before and after school students. She also describes these experiences in a monthly newsletter that she sends to Gatewood staff and district leaders. In this most recent newsletter, Marcia shared, "This week was full of color. We made sparkly shamrocks. Then we created clouds and rainbows. This week was also time to start our first seeds for the garden. Each week we will cultivate the garden so that the ground is ready for planting in May." So I'd like to thank Marcia for providing enriching and educational experiences for our Kids in Co learners. And then I'll close with this. Live More Screen Less has been a guest presenter in our district and recently visited North. They worked with staff and students at North, and the goal of the organization is not to completely ban devices or screen time for our young people, but to help students smartly manage their social media use and presence. So I'd like to thank Nurse Ann Sulzer, teacher Kimberly Bush, Assistant Principal Hinda Abdi for their work in partnering with Live More Screen Less. I'd also like to thank HEF for their $2,500 donation to fund Live More Screen Less's work with students there. And then I'll close with this video, which is a newscast because Fox News was recently at North interviewing staff and students.
Play Beat the Buzzer this March at Grand Casino Hinckley, and you could net your share of over $62,000 cash. Be here on Friday, March 31st for your chance to step up and take your shot at our lineup of cash prizes this March at Grand Casino Hinckley.
Well, we challenge you to find any family household in the state that isn't challenged by screen time in their home. Headline after headline warns about the effects of that on kids. It's a huge problem for a local nonprofit trying to find a healthy screen time balance. It is now crunch time because in order to help grow and reach more kids, they need a hearing at the state capitol by a deadline, which is this coming Friday. Fox 9's Leah Bino has more now on this quest for digital wellness, especially among young people.
We love answering the snap. Ninth graders Emily, Layla, and Alice are aware they're part of a generation that has grown up with digital devices at their fingertips. In their words, for every pro, there's a con.
I don't realize how long I'm on my phone until I check the time and it's oh, it's 2 a.m. Yeah. So I'm oh, well.
It should not be that addicting, but obviously our phones are kind of like an addiction. So this is bad.
Recently, Hopkins North Junior High took part in a discussion led by the Minnesota-based nonprofit Live More, Screen Less. Conversations aim to use peer-to-peer settings to help make young people more aware of how much time they might be spending on social media, online video games, various screen-driven outlets, and when it becomes unhealthy.
This is a part of their reality. This generation they had a cell phone or an iPad put into their hands when they were in the grocery cart at age 2. That's when the cell phone became available, and so it's not going away. And so trying to navigate and find a balance, we believe, is the #1 way to combat this addiction.
Assistant Principal Hinda Abdi has seen the ripple effect from too much phone time, ranging from struggles with mental health to academics. That's why school nurse Ann Selzer wrote the grant to get Live More, Screen Less into their school.
So they're coming in upset. They're coming in, with depression, anxiety, and other mental health concerns because of social media and in light of, too much screen time and screen use.
Our goal is to make real life connections and give the why. Like kids understand and interact and proceed to do things when you give them the why.
In 2021, Minnesota lawmakers became the first state in the country to designate state dollars towards digital wellness.
So our organization is not anti-technology. What we are about is balanced, intentional, and effective use of technology.
The founders of Live More, Screen Less say the results are a foundation of online resources for families, network of organizations, teacher training, and peer-to-peer training like we saw in Hopkins.
Pre-2020, we were struggling with managing devices, and now it's just exponentially greater.
Now they have a bill at the Capitol aiming to expand programs to as many Minnesota students and school districts as possible. They have bipartisan support. But what they don't have is a hearing to advance the bill.
They have done an incredible service to our state, and we just need to grow what you're already doing.
I believe in this investment because we're educating educators. We're empowering students to be leaders within their own communities.
And as much as students we talk to don't like giving up the phones, even they agree this is a subject everyone can learn from.
If we stop the amount of time that we have on our phones now and social media and all that, then maybe we can make it better for the generations coming after us.
Leah Bino, Fox 9.
If you'd like to learn more about Live More, Screen Less, and explore their resources, we've put a link on our website, Fox.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any board member comments or questions for Dr. Mary Perry Reed? With that, I would look for a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the agenda. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carries. Next, I would look for a motion to approve the consent calendar.
So moved.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the consent calendar. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carries. Next, we'll go to our treasurer's report with Treasurer Adams.
Thank you, Chair Westmoreland. Expenses of note this time include numerous charges for energy, natural gas, and electricity. And considering the kind of weather we've had this winter, it's not surprising. Also, numerous charges for substitute teachers. I recently attended the musical Tina downtown at the Orpheum, and at the end of the show, they recognized all the stand-ins and all the substitutes that performed, and it was phenomenal. And in fact, I think they actually had to cancel a couple of performances down there because they didn't have enough substitutes. So we aren't the only ones suffering from lack of substitutes, but we're lucky to have a service, teachers on call, that we can call on for most of our needs. The snow event on February 21st through the 23rd cost us over $36,000 for snow removal. And yes, that tops the one that we had in January. There's a check written for $10,585 for winter tuition at the University of Minnesota for post-secondary education opportunity students. $70,000 for food and supplies. And it'll be interesting to see how that changes now that free lunches and free breakfast went into effect yesterday. So we'll see if more people take advantage of that. $1,600 for instructional supplies for biology, the culinary arts, and cabinet making courses. And a question about our career and technical education came up at a meeting that Rhoda and I attended yesterday. So I'll address that in my report later. $5,928 for new cafeteria tables at Tanglin, and $300,000 for a new air chiller for this building, for Eisenhower Community Center. So with that, I move that we approve total disbursements in the amount of $1,889,915.80 for the period of March 2nd, 2023 through March 15, 2023.
I have a motion to approve the treasurer's report. Is there a second?
May I ask one clarifying question?
Sure.
Did you mentioned universal school meals, which we were all very excited about and talked about starting soon. Is that actually next September? Is it the next school year?
No, it actually started yesterday. Wow, I was amazed that it was going to start that quickly, but the governor did the signing on Friday and said it would take effect on Monday. So.
Okay.
So I think we've got some extra cash registers we could dispense with in this district.
Thank you.
I have a motion to approve the treasurer's report. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the treasurer's report. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carries. We'll move on to new business. Our first agenda item under new business is our fiscal year 2023 budget update and 23-24 budget discussion. So I will turn it over to Dr. Mary Perry Reed and welcome Director Chapanduka and our budget team up to the table.
Thank you, Chair Westmoreland. I'd like to welcome Triro, Nick, and Pam to the table to continue the discussion that we started during the workshop. I'd also like to thank our educators from West Junior High for their comments during open agenda about ensuring that schools are sufficiently resourced to, especially if we are intent on realizing our bold goals in our system. And we know that every year preparing the budget for the next fiscal year is a very challenging process, especially when we need to make staffing and program decisions before we hear from the state. And I think many of us know that 84% of the budget does go to salaries and benefits. So it's a very critical time. We know that our budget is tight, and there are many, many, many acute decisions that have to be made, and we're going to do the best we can to make sound decisions. I'm very grateful to our Director of Business Services, Tarira Chapanduka, who regards our budget as a moral document, and we do want to be thoughtful about the process and about what schools and staff need. I'm grateful to Pam Carmen for all of her modeling and spreadsheet magic and just all of the work that she does behind the scenes, and to Dr. Lightfoot for the staffing and the programming and other critical insights to inform the process. So it's a big job that we take very seriously, and we also want to be experienced as being highly responsive to our stakeholders. So thanks again for being here, and I'll let you proceed.
Thank you, Dr. Mary Perry. Good evening, Chair Westmoreland, respective board members. Again, this is a continuation of some of the conversations we've been having since the beginning of the school year, as well as what we brought to the board at our previous regular and workshop. So for tonight, we'll start with some of the timelines around staffing, as well as budgetary timelines. At the same time, I would like to acknowledge what we had from a feedback standpoint from our valued leaders from West Junior High, and we'll try to tackle some of the concerns around budget and what has transpired this year to bring us to where we are. But before we go deeper into some of those conversations, we just want to make the board aware of our timelines and what will be coming before the board on April 25th, and the support we've been giving to building leaders as they start to tie out their budgets. And I'm very impressed with the knowledge and skills which have been imparted to our building leaders for them to understand their budgets and staffing, and to be proactive around being accountable for the finite resources the system receives from our community. So for that, I thank them. I'll give this opportunity to Dr. Lightfoot to kind of take us through the timelines around staffing, and then I'll give some more pointers around the budgetary timelines too.
Good evening. As we mentioned in the workshop, the structure of the timeline that you see in front of you is developed collectively with the Staffing Budgeting Committee. Is meeting weekly as we progress along the way. As you will note, we are in our budget tie-out process, meeting with every building, looking at all of the budget components, mapping out all of the available resources, any changes, and then, of course, putting all of that together in the staffing plan that follows. You'll see the timelines in front of you, very typical for what we look at as our annual timeline. As I mentioned in the workshop, we did push that back a little bit further so that we could have that additional time to manage the 6-9 transition, especially as we think about the work ahead, as you look into the timelines that bring us right up to break and shortly thereafter. With notice, of course, in April is our typical timeline for any reductions that would need to be necessary. And then as well, with the end of the budget approval process being at the end of the school year, right around that first week in June.
Thank you, Dr. Lightfoot. Just to add to that, we'll be actually completing our budget tie-outs around April 15th. Which will lead us to bring a preliminary budget to the board on April 25th. And in May, we'll do our first read to the board. And on June 6th, the board will approve the fiscal year 24 budget. So that being said, I just want to take you through some of the key components around our budget. As you all know, enrollment is actually the driver of how we receive resources into the district. There are other factors. One in terms of some of the application for benefits, which brings in some of the categorical dollars, and we have had some significant shift this year going into next year around enrollment, and that has played a significant impact in terms of how resources are being allocated and used in the system. So I just want to make sure that that's well understood. And one of the components of how we allocate resources is through our predictable staffing model, which is the baseline, which also allows us to set aside dollars for buildings to use either discretionary or use those dollars for priorities which are unique to each specific building. So we start with our revenue, and right now, how we have done this, just knowing that we don't have all the information around any inflationary increases coming into the district as a starting point, so that at least we can plan ahead and make sure that building leaders at least have enough time to be able to play around with scenarios. We set allocations from a conservative standpoint at a 0% increase, knowing that there are still conversations happening at the state level for some additional inflationary resources on the basic revenue, which we don't know at this point in time, but we know for certain that we'll be receiving some additional dollars. And once we receive those additional dollars, based on our formulas, we'll be able to distribute some of those dollars back into buildings to mitigate some of the challenges we know buildings are facing. So from a breakdown standpoint, based on what we have at this point in time in terms of revenue and enrollment, we have about 15.1% of our revenue coming out of the operating referendum, which amounts to about $17.6 million. 4.7%, about $5.4 million, is from location equity, which is the local options approved by the board. 12.9 or 11% is our capital projects levy, which is restricted to technological needs across our system in terms of infrastructure or some of the key personnel in our buildings who are working around technology and media. We have about $1.4 million or 1.2% being integration, achievement and integration, again, categorical resources which are based on guidance from the state. 4.4% or $5.1 million is our compensatory aid, and that's an increase if you compare this year into next year, just because the fact that the state changed the way they calculate the revenue coming into that pot. In the past, it was based on the application of benefits, and for this coming year, they've included a component which is Medicaid, and some of those resources being tied to Department of Human Services. So that has added some additional dollars to the district. About 0.3% or $392,000 is our English learners. 9.4% or $10.9 million special education. Also factoring that special education budget is between 15 to 20 million dollars. So the difference is a cross subsidy, which is coming out of our general education aid. $3 million or 2.6% is federal grants, and that is not factored in any of the ESSA dollars, which we still have one more year to expend on those dollars. We'll come up with a proper actual determination of any of the dollars carrying over into next year. 0.4% or $409,000 is extended time. And the difference, which is about 51% or close to $60 million, is general aid, non-categorical dollars, to give us a total of about $116.8 million. On the expenditure, 56% or $65.4 million is salaries and wages. About 24% or $27.4 million is benefits. $17.3 million or 14.82 or 15% is purchase services, which includes contracted services around our transportation, other purchase needs for the district, other contracts with different vendors and service providers. $3.3 million or 3% is supplies. $1.7 million or 1.5% is capital expenditures. 1.3% or $1.5 million is our other expenditures around dues, conferences, or any other categories which don't fit within the salaries and benefits, purchase services, supplies, and capital expenditures. So right now, that's the structural balanced budget we have created based on the information we have, as well as some of the components around recommendations from the CFA group. So just to give context, we've actually kind of created some scenarios in terms of what this looks like. So right now, we've sent allocations into buildings based on a projection, again, which is tied to a conservative revenue. It is 0%, and we've calculated the expenditures, knowing that eventually we might be getting some more resources coming into the system. And based on what has been presented and allocated and distributed to the buildings, about 50% or 57% or $67.1 million is directly going into buildings to support programs. 37% or $43.6 million is district-wide allocations which are directly going into buildings. So things like transportation, operations and maintenance, our custodians, they are all factored in. We have district-wide insurance. We have our other post-employment benefits. These are all components which are actually centrally managed, but they are feeding into our buildings and departments. And then 5%, which is about $6.1 million, is department allocations, so business services, governance and management, human resources, some of the centralized information technology needs, some of the centralized special services needs, they all fall into that 5%. So just to sum it up, about 95% of the revenue and the expenditures are supporting directly our buildings, and about 5% centralized services which support indirectly our buildings, around payroll, around hiring, around some of the infrastructural management of our technologies. And just to further the conversations so that the board and the community can understand how we come up with some of the formulas, because I know sometimes the predictable staffing model has not been understood very well, and the reason why we definitely created the predictable staffing model was so that we could give autonomy to buildings in order for them to prioritize those resources based on each unique need in a building. So how we came to that is we created a predictable staffing model, which I would define as the best model for us to open a building. And then we identified based on ratios and ranges, which we have been tweaking at the minimal level so that we have enough resources to be able to give to a building leader and building leaders working with their staff to make determinations on what's best for programs affecting that building. So we come up with our revenue, and then we calculate based on the predictable staffing model and department needs the projected general fund expenditures. And any remaining dollars, we pull those dollars, we take our enrollment. So in this case, for fiscal year 23-24, our projected enrollment was $6,550. We divide the $6,550 in this case on the slide I have up on our discretionary allocations after we had made determination across what was needed for just the base of us actually starting a year was about $3.3 million. So we took our $3.3 million divided by $6,550 to get what we call a basic per student. And we take that basic per student, in this case, about $507. We multiply by the projected number of students in each building. We take those dollars and give them into the buildings, and then they cover that between what was allocated through the predictable staffing model and some of the other needs in that particular building. So we've played that scenario, and then we started playing around other scenarios. For example, if we end up getting a 2% increase, which would definitely increase that discretionary allocation. So right now, we've given a discretionary allocation of about $507 per student. If we end up getting a 2% increase, that basic per student will also increase. So in this case, it will increase to about $573, which will mean there's going to be additional $66, which may be allocated back into the buildings to actually cover some of the challenges we are seeing within our buildings. And some of those dollars may also be allocated in terms of covering some of the cost of living adjustments or some of the consumer price index increases we may be seeing based on market conditions. Again, we are being very conservative as a starting baseline, just knowing that if any additional dollars come into the system, we do have a formula which we can use to be able to have those dollars have impactful outcomes in our programs, in our buildings, just considering the finite resources we have. As we're putting together the budget for fiscal year 23-24, we did make some changes around some of the categorical allocations and how they've been distributed over the years. So, for example, ADSIS, which is the alternative delivery of specialized instructional services, which has mostly been allocated to the junior highs over the years. And this time around, leadership came to a consensus that we wanted to have these resources distributed across our system. So now they are benefiting the entire district between our elementary, our junior highs, and our high school. And that had a significant impact to the junior highs because in the past, close to $1 million on a biennium was actually coming into the system and shared between the two junior highs, and now taking that allocation and distributing it to about 10 different sites does have an impact. So that's one change which has happened, which definitely can have an impact, and I think we've seen that impact. The other component is around title. Title was benefiting 4 of the elementary schools, and now it's benefiting more schools between the elementary and the high school and the junior highs based on their free and reduced lunches. So that was another change which happened. If there are any questions around the programs, I'll refer to Director Eto and Sarah Sena. The other component is around achievement and integration. Again, achievement and integration, just the way the plan is being managed and how the dollars are shifting and being channeled into our buildings. Kind of did shift the way we do those calculations. But the big impact is around enrollment. And if you look at enrollment from what we initially projected for this year, which was a projection of about 6,850, and you factor in what we are projecting into next year, which is about 6,550. And then you start to look at the shifting and movement with the 6-9 grade configuration. You can see that there's a lot of movement and a lot of nuances, which we definitely have not experienced in the past, which definitely look like it's a significant impact, of which it is. Right now, is we have the current year and what we are projecting in a deficit, and not wanting to continue in that trajectory, we have to shift our practices. We have to shift the way we definitely are looking at our enrollment projections and factor in the 6-9 grade configuration with the movement of a grade from the elementary into the junior and a grade from the junior into the high school. So there's definitely an impact, at least at the elementary and the junior highs, and an increase into the high school. So those are the some of the components we are working with. We'll still come back to the board and provide more information as we get more details from the state, as we refine our budget tie-outs with the principals. But so far, with all the field work we've done with the principals, we've kind of been trying to at least put some foundation, and we'll come back to the table and identify some of those pieces which require attention and find solutions. I don't know if anything else, Dr. Lightfoot or Pam, you may want to add. That's what we have, and we'll take any questions from the board.
Thank you, Director Chapanduga. That helps us as a board understand, and our community understand kind of the timeline we're working with, and then some of the budgetary considerations. I do want to lead with a question around the ADSYS Title I and Achievement and Integration portions. It sounds from this presentation like we are trying to move toward a more equitable funding model with those streams of income. How is that? How So, because I'm looking at those as like three things that are kind of interrelated, right? Because we've been using those funds in different ways, and now we're changing how we're using each one of those buckets. And I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit more to kind of the interplay between those three funding streams and how things are going to look differently.
Sure, and maybe Dr. Lightfoot, you can help me from a historical context around how we ended up with the ADSYS just at the junior highs, as well as the title being funded to the elementary schools. And again, I think that's kind of been at play in terms of when we studied, and these are not conversations we started this year. We've been looking at this in the last couple of years and trying to figure out, okay, how do we become equitable across our system, and also looking at when you take a look at the ADSYS program and how it can benefit students across the district instead of starting at a specific point in time. Working with leadership, we started to look at the different formulas we can put into practice from an equitable standpoint, and started playing around, at least as a starting point, to refine some of these determinations around calculations using some of the free and reduced, and trying to identify, those students who definitely are impacted by the alternative delivery model. I won't be able to speak into the program aspects of this. I will have some experts if the board wants more information. But from a historical context, maybe Dr. Lightfoot can maybe help us from that standpoint.
Sure. Originally, the ADSYS grant work came in from our middle level. As we did that further exploration, part of the requests were also looking at would our elementary and high school be able to access and expand possible resources. As we explored that opportunity, more dollars were available if we broadened the capacity for the entire district to apply for ADSYS. And as a leadership team, that was the direction that was taken to look to potentially district-wide increase the amount of dollars that were available. They're again distributing that accordingly. As part, I think, also with the Title I, that was the other discussion that happened with the leadership team. And Drew, you may be able to speak to some of that distribution system-wide as well. But as we looked at the distribution of funds being centered in 4 buildings, part of the work was, if we look at serving students where they are and where they're generating the revenue, how would we look at doing that continually throughout the course of the system as well, and what would that look like? Shifting that at the same time to deliver the revenue into the places that direction seemed to be headed as far as programming was concerned, with the Title I and the school-wide approach that was being taken.
Thank you, that's helpful. So at some sites, there might be a loss of ADSYS funding, and then there would be an increase in Title I funding.
Yeah, at least in the first year, the impact definitely can be felt strongly. But as we move into future years and everything is leveraged, maybe you might start to see some of the benefits of these district-wide programs.
Okay, thank you. Wondering if my board colleagues have any comments or questions for the team.
Chair Westmoreland.
Yes, Director Adams.
I know that this year, well, I've been told that this year MDE went from using applications for free and reduced lunch to something called direct certification, which is where they look at, families that are on Medicaid or some other type of qualifying program in order to determine the level of poverty within a school. Are we using that direct certification method right now within Hopkins? Do you know?
Just for compensatory for next year, that's what we are using, and that's why when you start to look at the revenue coming in, it is actually increased. Just because there's a pilot going on with the state where they're actually using that direct certification as well as information through Medicaid. And I know I've been talking to my colleagues across the Twin Cities school district, and they've seen a huge increase in their compensatory dollars. At this point in time, that's the information we have, because again, things like title also use the application for benefits, and I don't know with the universal meals what that would do to title formulas and allocations.
Okay. Yeah, because I know free and reduced lunch applications determine qualification for a whole lot of stuff. You know, compensatory aid, Title I, what was it, ADSIS? So there's probably other programs too, but I want to make sure that we get our share when free and reduced lunch counts go away.
I can assure you it's something we're monitoring very closely, looking at what happened last year and the year before, and now seeing where we're at this year, and then how does that project going forward.
Right.
We're looking at that very regularly.
Okay, good.
Yes.
I just wanted to make one mention about the ADSIS funding. So I think what our educators from West is saying, that to right size sort of in 1 year does impact the budget, and we definitely understand that. I think just to be really transparent with everyone, it really is a moral dilemma, I think, and we say that our budget is a moral document, and there are lots of sort of decisions that have to be made to make the best interpretation of how specific resources are supposed to be spent. And so the moral dilemma with ADSIS is that the primary purpose of that funding is to keep students out of special ed and to provide interventions and targeted research-based interventions early in elementary school to truly reduce the numbers of students who are being referred to and then identified as needing an individualized education plan, or IEP. So it's kind of like, okay, do we continue with allocating those dollars at the junior high levels, and then obviously having those dollars pay for the instructional support needed for those interventions, or do we allocate those dollars at the elementary schools to provide those interventions early on so that kids will not need those services when they get to junior high? So as you can see, it's really kind of a moral struggle, and you know, I think we'll just have to make our best determination, especially at this point, you know, what is the best way of proceeding. It would be very hard at this point to take dollars away from the elementaries, but we do still have an unknown for how much we will receive from the state, and perhaps there's an opportunity there. So I just wanted to acknowledge this pretty critical dilemma that we face.
Thank you. Other board member comments or questions on the budget? You mentioned an enrollment impact at the junior highs and, an enrollment increase at the high school. That's obvious because we're adding 9 to the high school. Is the enrollment impact at the junior high, is the 6-9 shift a part of that? Or are there other considerations there?
So the enrollment impact is across our system. What it has just done is we have seen a shift down in enrollment, and at the same time, the 6-9 grade configuration does show a reduction in terms of students coming into the junior highs. So if you take those two components, I mean, I'll just give you an example. If our enrollment had stayed to what we had projected, and then the 6-9 impact comes into play, we'll probably have seen a small shift. We are seeing a bit of a significant shift in comparison to what we have seen in the past. And then you add in a factor of a great movement, and that looks like definitely like a huge impact.
Thank you. That helps me understand better.
Chair Westmoreland?
Yes.
I'm feeling like I need to have some time to process this information as well as how that integrates with comments we've gotten from staff that will be directly impacted by this. So I just have some basic questions around the predictable staffing model, and where does that come from? Is this a district down to sites saying you're allowed this many staff? Do with it what you will? Or is it more of a, and I understand the discretionary funding and that can make up the balance, which we've talked about before, but, and also just have questions around where does special education, where does that staffing model come from? Is that coming from site leaders, you know, kind of a bottom up? If you could just give me an understanding of what is the interplay and how is our budgeting becoming more teal? Is that the right term? In practice.
Sure. And I'll invite Director Contreras, if she's in the room, to come talk about special education. And we can talk about the predictable staffing model, one from how we developed it from the ground up, and also give some context around what does that look like when those dollars are in the building, in front of a building leader or building admin, and how do they make decisions on what's best for the building. So I view the predictable staffing model as a resource allocation tool. So we're coming from an era where resources were heavily managed at the central level, and wanted to give buildings autonomy of how resources are coming into the building without dictating to them, like, this is what you're supposed to do. So what we did is we came up with a model, which is, okay, what do we need for us to open a building? What positions do we need? So definitely you need a building leader. So we say, okay, we need a principal, and developing some ranges and some formulas in partnership with leaders on, okay, what would we feel is the ideal maybe range or ratio for adding an admin assistant, for adding clerical work. And this process has not been static. It's a process which we have been refining from when we started it, and then we bring leaders to the table and say, well, what does this look like? What are the challenges? Let's play around with a different range. So for planning this year going into next year, we brought all the leaders to the table, and we said, okay, can you guys give us what you feel would be ideal in terms of ranges for you to be able to support your buildings? So they gave us feedback, they gave us ranges. We went back to the drawing board, we made some calculations, and we brought the results back to the building leaders and said, okay, if we go with the model you gave us, this is what the predictable staffing model will produce. This is the discretionary dollars a building will get in terms of flexibility. And then building leaders in conversation said, you know what, let's keep our predictable staffing model where we have kept it, because it actually gives us more flexibility in terms of dollars coming in and us prioritizing those dollars with the needs in our building. Although we allocate a specific FTE, for example, for teachers, it's at the discretion of the building leaders to make a determination of where the needs are. So we allocate resources, they take those resources based on those ranges, and then they make a determination after consulting with leadership in a building to say, okay, what is best for our building and what is best for our students. What we've always at least cautioned leaders is, okay, if we allocate you a resource for a principal, and then you said, I don't need a principal, when you know that you need a principal, because once those dollars have gone, they are gone. So it's not possible for us to allocate a principal FTE and then the building end up with no principal and come back to the district and say, well, we need a principal. So those are things we've just been very careful around, like what are those critical positions needed in a building based on the predictable staffing model. Also, at the same time, giving building leaders flexibility to identify the unique needs in their different spaces, which can be either covered by shifting some of those allocations based on the predictable staffing model, as well as the discretionary dollars we are giving them without specifying how those will definitely be used outside of a budget parameter.
Thank you.
Chair Westmoreland?
Yes.
This is more of a comment, but I'm just not comfortable with cutting the budget regarding our support staff, especially because our teachers do need that support. And as someone who's worked in the school district, having the extra pair of hands is like so important. And as it is, we were short. So I wouldn't be comfortable with cutting support staff, that's for sure.
Chair Westmoreland, actually, Director Contreras, if you could kind of help me understand how the special education piece plays into the predictable staffing model, like across our sites, and I think that would actually speak very well to the comment that Director Kahn made about how to support staff, and I know they're not all allocated to special education, but I think you might be able to touch on that as well.
For sure. So, good evening, everyone. I think, you know, special education has for a long time had a predictable model. So based on the severity of the disability, so we've had caseloads forever. Some are state mandated, and we usually are not. We usually try to staff so that our students with the highest needs within special education get the most staffing. So like if you think about our severe DCD students, we have a caseload of about 8. And so 1 teacher to 8 students with 2 paras. That's just an example. And I also use other district comparisons to make sure that we're marketable so that we can get staff in. But we've had predictable models in special education for many, many years. For instance, and then for students who spend the majority of their time in general education, our students that are resource students, our caseloads go up to 22. So when I first came, they were ranging between 15 and 22. We've maxed out at 22. Comparable models in other districts range up to 27. So we're about in the middle. And so we try not to increase those caseloads for teachers while trying to maintain maintenance of effort, so trying to keep the same amount of staff, but we also have growing needs, so we see students in more intense categories than ever before. And we have a predictable model too for paras. But as inflation goes up, it's hard to keep all those things intact. And we also have a growing number of students qualifying for special education. So I think pre-COVID, we were sitting right around 15% of our student population, and we're closer to 18% now. And I think I've been at the Capitol with a few of you advocating for increased funding. It has not come. I know with the surplus dollars given to the state, that did not include special education. So as our needs grow, our funding hasn't. And so I know there are other things, other implications for the increased funding that is going to come or potentially come into schools, but that did not include special education.
Thank you. Just a quick follow-up around that idea of predictable staffing model. I'm wondering, what is the interplay between the predictable staffing model that's being used at sites for our budgeting purposes and the predictable staffing model that's used through special education? Is it the same when you're doing the model for each site and the allocation for each site? Does that include special education, or is that something that's coming from, say, your office to each site?
That way, it's from our office to each site based on the number of students in each category. For instance, we did calculations. It's twofold. We did calculations, for instance, like on how many students need speech services. So a speech caseload goes up to 50. So then we prorate that based on how many students we have at that time, because we have to do a snapshot in time. Otherwise, it would forever change. So we would not be in sync with our budget parameters and deadlines if we kept counting for special education. So what we do is we kind of pick a March date, and then in the fall, if we need to do adjustments based on students that have qualified from March up until that time, because we have students like in birth to 3 that still qualify for services over the summer. So our numbers are never perfect because they're ever changing, but then we do adjustments in the fall. So to answer your question, we look at the number of students per site with special needs, look at the different categories that they're in, and give those allocations to the buildings, knowing at some sites that there are fluctuations.
So it's almost like parallel, predictable staffing models within each site.
Correct.
Okay. Thank
Each
you.
site, and then our private sites and our daycares for itinerant services for our early childhood. So we are trying to calculate for all students in all spaces the best we can.
Thank you.
Chair Westmoreland, I have one more question. Would the budget cuts include any cuts in the mental health care services that our students are receiving?
Our predictable staffing model has projected us to have more supports at secondary, especially with students matriculating from the other grades. And we're just hoping that we can account for the needs.
Yeah, because, I mean, for me, it's especially coming out of COVID, if anything, our students and our staff needed extra care regarding mental health. And like I've always said, we do need more paras, that's for sure, in our schools. So they're very important. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, what I'll say is, I mean, I know the predictable staffing model is not perfect. That's why we keep refining it every year. But the big elephant in the room is enrollment. If our enrollment would go up, we'll be able to have resources enough to put into our buildings. I mean, like I said, that when you look at a shift of projection of 6,850 to 6,550. That's a huge impact, which definitely is felt. And this is not just Hopkins. I mean, there's news in the daily news about the impact across different school districts too.
So continued advocacy of the legislature for fully funding public schools and all that that means, right? Special education. We have we achieved fully funded school meals, which will go into effect in the fall. I checked on that, looking at these percentage increases that you gave us, like several scenarios here. Obviously, we will continue to advocate for the highest, which would be 5 is kind of the highest that has been discussed during this session. Also, I agree with you that being more conservative in our projections is wise because we know how the legislature functions. And then also this question of enrollment, right, which is a constant that we absolutely need to be working on that. So. I'll just remind the board, process-wise, this is an information and discussion item tonight. No action needs to be taken. So before moving away from this to our next agenda item, I just want to give one last chance for board members to make a comment or ask a question on this item. Well, thank you for this informative discussion.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you all.
We'll move to our next agenda item, which is policies in first read. I will turn it over to Vice Chair Andreessen, who heads up our monitoring committee, and Assistant Superintendent Lightfoot will stay at the table with us.
Thank you, Chair Westmoreland. We have a few policies before the board this evening. All have been reviewed by the Monitoring and Policy Committee, and which, lucky for us, includes a student board rep so that we get that student voice as part of our conversation. And whenever we feel that a policy needs to go out to a wider community and get more varied and inclusive input, we are supported by our administration and also our student board reps in gathering that feedback. So with that, I will turn it over to Assistant Superintendent Lightfoot to walk us through each policy individually.
Thank you. Good evening. Good to be with you on the policies that are up in front of you this evening. First, I'll walk into policy 659, which is our communicable disease policy. We did minimal changes just to update some of the title and information that is contained with this, but no significant component changes that are part of the substantial elements of the policy. Would be open for questions on 659.
I think we can move to the next one.
All right. 675 is the enrollment of non-public school students. There are a couple noted changes that are there. The component that I think is evident is the change in grade 6. Part of the reason behind that in the policy is that, as we did note before, when we had enrollment of non-public school students, the enrollment that can be tracked for specific opportunities at specific times has always been the entry point that we've looked at. That has been predominantly available when we've looked at scheduled times 7 through 12 in the past, because we could note when a specific learning opportunity was starting and when it was ending, so we could have partial enrollment in those capacities. Now grade 6 will afford that opportunity as we look at that from a policy standpoint, so that is reflected there as well. So we note that in the policy. That's that specific level of change that's related to that. That is policy 675. Are there additional clarifications or other points that of note I could draw out for the board or respond to with policy 675? All right. The last one, 676, research activities. This is a policy that is specific to Hopkins schools. It handles how we will look at any questions that come in or requests that come in for research activities of which we would participate in. There are minimal changes here with just the notation of department nomenclature, but beyond that, no substantive changes that are part of Policy 676. If there are any additional questions that are related to this, I'm happy to attend to those as well. All right, then that's our trifecta for the evening.
Thank you very much. So with that, I would look for a motion that the board approve the above policies in first read and that the board direct the administration to prepare the policies for approval in second reading at the next meeting as part of the consent calendar.
So moved.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the policies in first read. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carries. Next, we'll move on to the summary of the superintendent's review. So after our March 7th meeting, we held an executive session to conduct the superintendent's mid-year review. Dr. Mary Perry Reed is our sole employee, and twice a year, the board meets in executive session per Minnesota open meeting law to evaluate her. Overall, Dr. Mary Perry Reed has a strong sense of self-awareness as a leader and is very responsive to board member questions and concerns that we bring to her, as well as community questions and concerns all the time. So oftentimes these evaluations are an opportunity for us to think bigger about the work that she's doing system-wide to move us forward toward Vision 2031. And so during the evaluation, board members expressed gratitude for this ongoing collaborative working relationship, that we know that we can get the information that we need from her and that the community needs from her to understand kind of the day-to-day things that we're doing in the district. And appreciation for the opportunity to kind of think bigger about some of these system-wide goals and the specific steps she's taking to achieve those. So kind of an overarching theme of the evaluation was this focus on alignment and coherence as we think about these three major goals for the entire system. So the first goal being a teaching and learning goal, that every E12 classroom will move toward concept and inquiry-based personalized learning that activates literate, critically conscious behaviors undergirded by wellness and restorative practices. So some of the successes that Dr. Mary Perry Reed shared with us were regular engagement with parents and caregivers around this model that is new to a lot of people in our community. School leaders using data to monitor growth, and continued work on our data infrastructure to be able to more clearly communicate this growth with our internal and external stakeholders. We also talked about some growth areas where we still have work to do as a system. So continuing to help our community understand what personalized learning is and why it's important. And communicating wins to our community when it comes to the work that our staff and scholars are doing around personalized learning, and making sure that those wins or those success stories are reaching a larger variety of community members. The next goal area we talked about was school and district culture. And the goal is, as a district, we will increase wellness by building a workplace culture that is safe and caring. We will experience wholeness by increasing trust, sharing power, and ensuring people are of equal worth. So some of the successes are strengthened internal communication to and from school leaders with their school communities, as well as staff internal communication. We as school board members receive those communications, so we've been able to see some of the evolution there. And then increased professional development around restorative practices and restorative culture specialists built into the predictable staffing model. Some growth areas are continuing to develop a strengths-based job environment that onboards and develops people's talents district-wide, and continuing to systematize all voices being at the table. The operations goal is we will identify and address system gaps or flaws that prevent employees from doing their jobs efficiently or effectively. So some of the successes being the support around our leaders who have been facilitating the 6-9 transition. The facilities study that was conducted, and then really taking a look at student-centered innovations and where we can continue to grow those. Some areas for growth, improving stakeholder experiences by improving efficiency and effectiveness, and one example is updating our internal software to more fully integrate systems. So I would welcome any board member additions if I missed anything there. This is, again, another information and discussion item, no action. So that is my summary. Okay, looks like we can move on to our board member reports. Who would like to go first?
Okay.
You've been volunteered by Director Khan, Director Adams.
She gave me the stink eye there.
No, it's
Well, March 8th, was noted earlier by Oscar, was AMSD Day at the Capitol. And we did, in fact, get to meet with all 9 of our representatives and senators that day. So I don't think that's ever happened before in our various trips to the Capitol. So that was great. We also got to experience Oscar's office. Oscar's an intern with Senator Ann Rest. She is the only senator that has an office in the Capitol building. And Oscar has probably the best office of any intern at the Capitol, with a view looking out over the mall in front of the Capitol. Wow. So we got to experience that. On March 10th, I attended the Minnetonka State of the City and listened to our mayor, Brad Wiersum, extol the virtues of Minnetonka. I, along with Director Ross, attended the Tanglin PTO meeting the following Monday and got to interact with some of our parents there. March 17, Friday that would be, the MSBA conducts a legislative chat every Friday, which I attend when I can, and find out what the status of various bills are at the Capitol. And then on, yesterday I attended Rhoda's State of the District presentation to Minnetonka seniors at Minnetonka City Hall. So it was a full agenda. Along the way, I also viewed a video, it's on YouTube, I believe, of the governor signing the bill that grants free meals to all of our students in the state. And if you have a chance to look at it, I think it's about a 15, 20-minute video. He had some other people speak at that, and I was particularly moved by Lieutenant Governor Flanagan's remarks, because she talked about growing up with a single mom who could not afford meals for her entire family, and how her mom would forego supper often, and by claiming she was not hungry. And she said later she grew up and realized, no, she was hungry, that she was just making sure that her kids had more food to eat. So it was a very moving experience to watch that, and it's still out there on YouTube. And I want to give particular shout out to our director and vice chair, Shannon Andreessen, who really worked hard to make sure that that bill got signed and got introduced in the first place. I think Shannon spoke at 3 different delegate assemblies of the Minnesota School Boards Association before they finally adopted it as a plank in their platform and got their support behind it. And I tried to find room for her on the agenda at the signing, but it was a small room, and it was at Webster Elementary School in northeast Minneapolis, and I was told there was only room for only a few adults. So unfortunately, we weren't able to do that. But anyway, thank you to Shannon for her efforts on the part of students in Minnesota.
Thank you, Shannon. Thank you.
All of you. It's a community effort.
Thank you, Director Adams.
Sure.
I'll go next if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Yesterday I had the pleasure of attending the Somali Parent Advisory Council meeting. I was with Lindsay Leisman, who is the community school coordinator at West Junior High, Alex Fisher, our director of community ed, and Dika, who was our Somali liaison, and Maria, who is our restorative justice specialist. And I can't tell you how impressed I was with how well our group was listening to our concerned Somali parents. And, you know, it was just such a comfortable space, and I was so happy to hear the Somali parents' comments just regarding their concerns and how they wanted them addressed. And I really loved how inclusive we've become as a school district and conscientious of our families and how to serve them in the best possible way. So yeah, and I give total credit to Lindsay and Alex and Dika and Maria for that, with the sensitivity they deliver. And that's my report.
Thank you. Vice Chair Andreessen.
I've got nothing except universal school meals, yay.
Right? That's not nothing.
Yeah, that was the highlight, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important to just like take a moment to celebrate that. There's so many hard decisions that leaders are making at every level, and hard work that's being done in education spaces across the state and at the legislature. And I think just being intentional about celebrating the wins is very important and energizes us as we move forward. So thank you, Director Adams, for doing that.
I have a brief one.
Wonderful.
I won't say much more than Treasurer Adams already talked about the legislative kind of day at the Capitol that we attended and how well that went, and then also, of course, the universal school meals. And as part of the Legislative Action Coalition, I've never been part of it during a funding year, and so I have recently gotten a little tutelage from them about what the Legislative Action Coalition does now. And so one of the responsibilities, once the platform has been set, kind of at the beginning of the school year, and the session starts, and we've had an opportunity to do outreach to all of our legislators, something that the LAC does is kind of humanize some of those numbers occasionally for our legislators. So if they'll run into kind of this new mandate, these bills are tremendously long, and so if they, reading it on paper might sound like a great idea. And then the long history of the LAC and kind of the relationships that we have fostered there means that the LAC is a resource that a legislator might reach out and say, what would this mean to your district? What, if we made this change from this percentage to that percentage, what are we talking about in real dollars? What are we talking about in terms of FTEs? And so that being responsive to what is currently being discussed, and occasionally we'll write a letter of support, or if we have a concern about language that gets changed in any bills, we'll respond to that. So that is what the LAC will be doing through the end of this session, which is ostensibly supposed to end, May 22nd, 23rd?
Right.
And then another thing that I've done since the last meeting is attend the high school robotics open house. And the high school robotics team occupies kind of a strange area in between an athletic and a club, and so suffers from some of the issues that were highlighted by our student board representatives. They are potentially, so part of their mission is they do career readiness in a lot of ways, and one of those ways may end up being where they will come talk to the board or talk to the larger community about their kind of value proposition and how they use their funds. So I will stay in touch with them about that. And the high school robotics team, the Technocrats, is competing this coming weekend in La Crosse, the 24th, 25th, and 26th.
Very cool. Thank you.
They were at the Alice Smith Imagination Fair, displaying, like, running their robot and doing different things, and the littles were just in awe. So
I think it is, it's definitely something that is on, I don't want to get too far on the robotics soapbox at the moment, but the entire FIRST program that they utilize is founded by international best practices, and the goals that they have around hands-on learning and, direct career preparedness is very impressive. And there's a lot of parents who have an eye on making Hopkins kind of I don't know what the word would be, but kind of a destination school around that topic as well.
Thank you. Other board member reports?
I was wrong. Yeah. I think I need to correct something. We received an email that references a story on NPR regarding the Universal School Meals bill. Apparently, it did not go into effect yesterday. So I guess the governor misspoke when he had the signing, because he said it was starting on Monday. It goes into effect this fall on September of 2023.
Excellent, thank you. So I had the honor of presenting at the Hopkins City Council meeting last Tuesday alongside Hennepin County Commissioner Chris Latondras, who is a former Hopkins School Board member and our current commissioner for Hennepin County District 6, about an initiative that we've been working on together since last spring. It's modeled after the Brooklyn Bridge Alliance for Youth. We are tentatively calling it the West Metro Youth Collaborative. So the goals of this collaborative, which ideally would be an intergovernmental collaboration that would bring in community organizations as well. The goals would be to strengthen youth voice, opportunity, and social connection in West Suburban Hennepin County, increase coordination between Hennepin County cities and schools to support youth, attract new funding for youth-focused initiatives in West Suburban Hennepin County, and scale promising youth-focused initiatives and launch new evidence-based pilots. So the idea for this came out of a series of conversations that were hosted by the City of Hopkins. Mayor Patrick Hanlon convened a group of community leaders to talk about holistic community safety. And so this was one of the ideas that came out of those conversations. And last summer, we were funded through ARPA funds from the City of Hopkins and Hennepin County to do some research about what this model might look like. So we hired 8 Hopkins students and recent graduates to do a youth participatory action research project around how we might build out a model like this and what some of the needs that need to be addressed by and through this model would be. So Dominique Pierre-Toussaint, who's the Community Engagement Director for ICA Food Shelf, and I were kind of the adult coordinators of this, but really one of the tenets of the main tenet of youth participatory action research is that the young people really led the work. So they designed the process for the work. They engaged in this research. They hosted interviews, focus groups, an event at the Depot Coffee House. to share information about what this could look like and then also gather information. Some of the top needs and solutions identified through our young consultants were mentorship, mental health, community involvement and systems change, and then also support for youth passions and how they might grow those into possible career pathways or just like passions to enjoy, right? So the youth consultants who were part of this work got so excited about it that they went above and beyond. So we were just tasked with doing this qualitative research, but they decided we want to actually like create a mini version of this model. So they did, and they named it Generation Enhanced Network. They created branding around it, and we have been kind of keeping this model going, really trying to live out what this larger West Metro Collaborative could eventually look like. We talked a bit about that, shared that information with the Hopkins Council, and then Commissioner Latendresse talked about next steps for trying to create this larger model. So right now, he's been in conversation with select West Metro cities and school districts, Hopkins being one of them, to present the concept, engage potential membership interest, and then in the summer of 2023, Hennepin County will host a convening among the interested cities and school districts to engage in some preliminary visioning, planning, co-creation, talking through what commitments would look like. And of course, this convening will have youth voices at the center. I hope that Commissioner Latendresse will be able to visit us this spring to talk more about this model that he's building out. One of the arguments that he's made for why we need this is that there is a lot of funding available, either that the county already has, that's being funneled into other communities, and we don't receive a lot of that funding specifically for youth here in District 6 because we don't have a structure like this for it. But there's also access to federal funding that flows through the counties that we could be tapping into as a community that we're just not, because again, we don't have a structure like this. So it's been exciting work, steep learning curve, youth voices at the center, all good things, and I will continue to keep the board and our community updated on that. So with that, I would look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a fast second. Any discussion? Someday there will be. Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Motion carries. This meeting of the Hopkins School Board is adjourned at 9:23 p.m. Thank you all so much.
All right.